Welcome to the Play to Earn Finals Championship Summary FakeMews Edition. Throughout this video, you're going to see the entire journey that I experienced throughout the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained. Approximately $10,000 of prizes throughout the 32 contestants that made it into the field. To make it into this tournament, you had to qualify by doing well in other previous of the play to earn events. I earned my spot by winning one of the events. You didn't have to do that to get in, but I want to get in with some style, a little bit of flair, intimidate some people. I ended up coming in with the number 6 overall seed, and seeding was based for the top 32 based upon seeding. Based upon how many points you earn. So yeah, and the 6th highest because I didn't do anything besides that one tournament. But anyways, throughout this video, we're going to go over some major controversies that happened in the tournament. It's going to absolutely shock you what went down, and I don't think this is known to the public on all the details, and I'm just going to leak it all, okay? I'm just going to leak everything. Also, in this video, I'm going to go over some of my own secret preparation, and maybe we're going to be leaking some things that Saints doesn't like to see. I can't guarantee anything. But you're going to be getting some inside information on what it's like to be an Infinite Mana team member preparing for the biggest Gods Unchained event in history. So let's just go ahead and dive into this, shall we? So the first thing I'm going to go over here is the pre-tournament preparation. So going into this tournament, I wanted to be a little bit deceptive, and I went above and beyond before the tournament started to try to trick opponents. The first off, my weekend rank from the prior weekend was a complete throwaway. So I played my weekend ranked on Friday, knowing that Saturday, potentially Sunday, I would have to be playing in the Play to Earn event finals, and of course I hope to be playing in it, and figured get my weekend ranked in game. But I didn't want to run any decks that I was actually planning on running in the tournament. So I ended up doing my entire weekend ranked with the Nubians, and finishing with a 9-9 record, which, I mean, it's a Nubians, right? We're basically flipping coins. So we had a kind of a throwaway weekend rank, thinking that one thing I do a lot when prepping for opponents is I assume that the deck they play on weekend ranked is the deck that they're most comfortable with and the most familiar with and most confident with. Obviously, me playing a Nubians is kind of like, I don't want to give you any information, and if you prepare for a Nubians and start teching for just pure Nubians, you're probably going to be teching for a deck that I'm not playing. And I had absolutely no intention of playing a Nubians throughout this event. Another thing I did, and this is going a little bit above and beyond, and honestly kind of a little bit pointless, is I decided I wanted to make my GU Decks page useless. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you. Bam! This is what I did. So I decided to play one game with 3 different decks for each god. The reason being is I don't want you to look up my deck list on GU Decks. Now, there are other ways to look up deck list. However, by doing this, if you click on any of those lists, none of them were useful at all. Okay? So all of those were completely useless. Shout out to Atlantic and Deception, though, for going 3-0. But I basically put all those decks, they're decoy decks. None of them were real. Most of them were meme decks. Most of them were really bad. They were so bad that I deranked from Mythic all the way to Solar Gold. So throughout this tournament, you're going to be seeing me at rank 10. That's normally not the stomping grounds that I tend to hang out at, but it was the reality of the situation because for preparing for this tournament, I wanted to hide my GU Decks page. Now, of course, if you put more research into this stuff, you can kind of figure out a lot of my lists and kind of figure out which ones are some of my favorite. I stream regularly. I make videos talking about my own gameplay, so there is probably nobody easier to scout if you want to put in the effort than myself. That being said, if you're lazy and just look at the GDex page, I pretty much just made it useless for the weekend. And I figured that was going to be the smarter strategy entering the tournament. I'm not saying that this is something you necessarily need to do for every tournament. In fact, this is the first time I've ever done it. But I thought it'd be an interesting thing to include in for this tournament. Being the biggest tournament, I wanted to be as least helpful for my opponent. If this gives me potentially a 1% extra boost, then it's worth it, right? Well, at least that was what I was telling myself to console myself for deranking to Solar Gold. But anyways, I think it is time to get into some of the action, isn't it? When I say we're going to talk about round number 2, I actually mean it quite literally, because I have no gameplay footage to show you at all. I ended up being very lucky. May have been, I think one other person was also very lucky as well, but my opponent was on vacation. They brought their laptop, but their laptop couldn't connect to Gods Unchained. Therefore, I ended up getting a win by default because they couldn't play the game. So that was a very lucky situation for me. So I go from the round of 32 to the round of 16 without having to play a game. However, that wasn't the spiciest thing that happened in the round. In fact, it probably was the least spicy. Let's be real. Not much very interesting. Just kind of positive RNG for me. But other people were actually playing their games. And other people had some controversial situations that came up that probably wasn't handled in the best way. I'm going to start with the first one that happened. And the first one that happened was between Devoted and Lord Crew. This happened in their first game of their match. They both queued with Control Light in game number 1. And, of course, as you would predict with Control Light, it went on for a while. Okay? Then we reach a point that's pretty late in the game. Note from the screenshot that I saw, neither side was out of cards from their deck. So it could still go on for long. They didn't break any world records by how long the game went, okay? Lord Crew claimed that he was winning in the final position. Devoted claimed it was about equal. Those were the official wall stances. Take either side's word for what it's worth. But how the game ended was Devoted disconnected and lost the game because disconnection, right? The tournament organizers had said in the chat that, oh, if you disconnect, you lose the game. And Lord Crew was like, yes, I want to take the win, which is what you would expect him to say. He thought that he was winning the game. His opponent disconnected, so he should win the game. That seems to be the logical ruling. However, Devoted got out his law team. And apparently he's got some very good lawyers. Okay? Because what ended up happening was you couldn't even predict this. This is like, I could literally give you 10 different scenarios that make more sense than the official ruling the tournament organizers gave. They ended up giving both sides credit for a win, which makes no sense. Okay, Devoted disconnects. There's some dispute on who's winning. I'm not claiming that he did this intentionally. I'm going to go ahead and get that out here, okay? I'm not claiming that he did this intentionally. But I am claiming that he deserves the loss. Here's why. You can't let people just disconnect when they're losing and then say, we need to replay the game. That is absolutely stupid. People will exploit that. People will use that for nefarious purposes in later rounds, later tournaments, later games, even in the same match. Come on, this will get exploited. So when he disconnected, we'll play a very buggy game. It's very unfortunate that you disconnected. However, you lost. So that's how it should have gone. Instead, they give both sides credit for a win. And if I'm in Lord Crew's position after game number 1, I'm quite mad. I mean, it's tough. You thought you won the game. Now your opponent is getting credit for a win that they do not deserve. I mean, if you're a fan of Lord Crew, and there's tons of fans of Lord Crew out there, by the way, he destroyed me and everyone else in voting for the Council of Luminary. So he's got a lot of support. If you're a supporter of Lord Crew and you're mad about this decision, you deserve to be. because it was the incorrect decision. It clearly was the incorrect decision. There's not even a debate on this one. It's absolutely absurd. Credit to the Voted's Law team, though. I mean, he got a free win that he did not deserve. And then, of course, unfortunately, games 2 and games 3, Devoted wins. So Devoted won 2 games out of 3, but yet advanced in the match. Somehow Lord Crew lost the best of 5 by only losing 2 games. Yes. If you're flabbergasted on how that situation played out, you have the exact same perspective I have. It is absolutely absurd. Okay. So that was the first one. And that wasn't even the worst one. That was the one that happened chronologically first. Not long after that one happened, we had a situation that came up between Gwent and Clay. So Clay is already up 2-0 on Gwent. They're in game number 3. We have a situation where Clay is playing Control Deception and Gwent is playing Control Light. These games go on for a while. However, what happens in this game is Clay obviously either stole or copied a copy of Wrong Path earlier in the game. He plays Wrong Path on Odessa. Odessa, of course, makes you expend 2 extra mana when you play a spell. So the interaction, I actually don't know the correct ruling on this. But what happened in the game was he had to expend 2 extra mana. And also he draws a card, of course. And one of his cards in his hand ended up becoming hidden. Now, the thing with the hidden cards is a lot of times, if you mess around with it, you can actually drag the hidden card out if you remember what the hidden card was and play it later in the game. I've had this bug occur many times, and usually I'm able to resolve itself. But I'm sure that not everyone knows that you can resolve by just playing the card. It happens to me all the time when I play Control Light and get back the Divine Judgment from the board from the Radiant Bomber. Usually it just disappears in my hand, but I can still drag it out and play the card. So he had a card disappear. He also thought that the mana was bugged. However, I'm not 100% sure on that instance either, because it showed him with 2 mana and then he couldn't play his minion. Okay. But either way, I just want to go ahead and point this out. This is Control Light, this is Control Deception. The Control Light player is at 30, the Deception player is at 23. This is like in the middle of the game. We're talking, yeah, I mean, you probably still have about 20 minutes of gameplay left. Let's be real about this situation. So they actually play the rest of the game out. Okay? And Gwent wins the game. So it seems pretty legit. Well, the Nevos Law team is the greatest law team in the history of Gods Unchained. They took this bug. I'm not even kidding. They were able to go to the tournament organizers who made yet another dumb decision. Credit to Nevos here. Credit to Nevos. They saw a dumb decision in the Devoted game. They thought they would go for a dumb decision in this game against Gwent as well. So they go here and they say, hey, we had a bug. We want a replay. But they had to play for like 10 to 15 turns after said bug happened. And he only filed the report because he lost the game. If he wins the game, he's not saying anything about the bug. Like that, spoiler alert, he's not saying anything about the bug. So he plays on for 15 turns to make sure he doesn't win the game. When he finds out that he's not winning the game, because first off, Control Deception versus Control Light, it's going to go on forever. That had like no impact on the game whatsoever. Bugs happen. This bug in particular has existed for 3 to 4 months. The disappearing card bug, but generally you can play it. And you can argue whether or not the Odessa mana bug on the same turn was a bug or not. I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know what the official rule is. I don't think that anyone actually does. Nobody's playtested that enough. Like, you wrong path it, you're not obliterating it, you're putting it on the top of the deck as the 2 mana thing trigger. My gut instinct is that it shouldn't. But my gut instinct has been wrong on a lot of these Gods Unchained things. So I don't even know if that portion was bugged. maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But like the difference being able to play an armor lurker where you're at 23 while both of you have 6 mana or not, it doesn't decide the game. It's not a game deciding decision. The opponent's at 30. Like, you either have more resources than your opponent or you don't. Flat out, end of story. The ruling in this situation ended up being that they had to replay, which is a stupid ruling. It's an absolutely stupid ruling. It makes absolutely no sense. Gwent fought hard, won the game, and bugs play a part of it. It's called Bugs Unchained for a reason, okay? Of course, they replay the game. Gwent can't be in a great mental state after literally, I mean, he lost the first 2 games. That doesn't feel good. He finally wins the game on game number 3, and he gets it stolen, robbed from him. It makes absolutely no sense what they are doing here. Of course, Clay goes on to win game number 3. You can say that it might not matter, but it should have been a 2-1 result in the Clay game. And it should have been a 2-1 result in the Devoted game. 2-1 leads are not insurmountable leads. And that will foreshadow into the next round. So our first match that we actually play in this tournament is in the round of 16, and we will be taking on Standing Cow. Now, a little bit of a backstory here is I think I've only ever had one prior meeting in tournaments against Standing Cow, but it was in one of these play to earn tournaments, and they beat me in the best of 1 round, so that was, not very fun. So this is kind of a revenge situation, hoping to get revenge for that loss. What I thought I saw coming into this match is Standing Cow has a high tendency for mostly aggro decks. For the most part, he's very aggro. So I wanted to start off with kind of a mid-range deception. I thought this was very good into his range. And let's just go ahead and get this show on the road here. So here it will play. Oh, I have to hit the button. I have to hit the button to get it to play. So we're going first, which is something that we like to do at times. And we're playing, it's kind of mid-rangey deception, but with Demogorgons and Helma, so some people would call it control deception, but my top end isn't as greedy as some top ends, so let's just put it that way. Our opponent, I'm pretty much expecting him to be playing a Hidden Rush aggro variant, so not surprised to see him come out, pip out an Armor Lurker on turn 1. Ours is Diamond, so we can really flex how strong we are. Not the best hand, obviously. Hunting Trap, Bound by Her Will get less value in this matchup because a lot of his stuff is hidden, so what are you really going to target? And since we kind of expect aggro, it is what it is. So we don't really have a productive turn this turn. Obviously, floating 3 mana is not what you want to do. And they're able to get the Frumentari, which lets them draw 2 cards. So they're getting a lot more value at the early start of this game than we are, which is a little bit discouraging. Here I have the opportunity to play Lethargy Mage, and it's nice because I can go ahead and Armor Lurker remove their 3/4. Well, that was converted to 2/4, and my Armor Lurker still lives. Of course, they can go ahead and trade off their Armor Lurker that's stat reduced for my Armor Lurker if they would like. And they can do numerous various things if it works out great. But here, they play a Ronalon Sparrow, and they draw 4 cards from the Frumentari. That is absolutely huge. So they have drawn 6 more cards than I have. So I'm going to Cutthroat and hope to find something good here. And we see a lot of cards in their hand. When you Cutthroat and you see a Cutthroat, it's pretty much always natural to take it. However, it might not have been the smartest thing for me to do here. It's kind of like an autopilot thing that I do here. And honestly, what I'm doing right now is I'm writing down every card in his hand. So if you're wondering why I'm taking so long, I actually literally wrote down every card in his hand. So I knew what he had for what that is worth. Something you can do if you're a mega tryhard. It's just really hard to just flat out remember everything. So especially with a hand that size. But we are at a pretty big card disadvantage. They have a lot of speed, so it's just an overall difficult spot. They go ahead and they put the front line and the +2/+2 on the Sparrow and go ahead and hide it. Uh, what we would love to do is we would love to get to that Valkus Discovery in the Sanctum. If we got to the Valkus Discovery in the Sanctum, we might could do some pretty good things. As you can see with our hand right now, I mean, we can pip out Rapture Dance, but what does that really do? And we could, but we're just going to go ahead and Cutthroat. So here, I see the Reflection Elementalist and right away pick it, because if they Reflection Elementalist on the Selfless Guildmate, then that is a big problem. They just topped the Reflection Elementalist, so getting that out of their hand, because that was the most problematic card. We still have issues dealing with that Sparrow, because they can just hide it, and I can't damage it twice in one turn if it's hidden. So that is a problem for me. And they go ahead and go very wide. Orfeo comes out. Here I only have one play that actually prevents lethal. And actually, I have multiple plays. I'm lying. Actually, when I'm commentating this, what I thought I should do was incorrect. But what I actually do during the game is definitely the right line here. We play Valkus Discovery, and that unhides his minion, which allows us to play the Stone Skin. We're at 9, so we can't really absorb any extra damage. That would be very problematic. So we're trying to hang on here, and they draw another Reflection Elementalist, which was one of their previous 2 draws was a Reflection Elementalist. Very clutch draw for our opponent, and ultimately not really the best situation from our perspective, right? So here we drop the Demogorgon, and I have very low expectations. There's a very high chance that he is lethal right now, so we play it just because we didn't really have anything else to do. If they go super wide, then maybe we can hit him with the Rapture and get an attack him with the Demogorgon and try to make a comeback. That's what we hope to do. But I can already see that he can go face with both Reflection Elementalists and by the Vow of Champions. So if he has one other additional point of burst, he would actually have lethal on this turn. And if he can just stat reduce my demo, then he can also steal it with an Umber Arrow, because we remember that he has Umber Arrow in his hand from earlier. So he can actually steal it right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to. So he goes ahead, steals the demo, hits me for 2, so I go down to 1. And yeah, all we can do here is go face and play Rapture. There's really not much else we can think of here. There's potential lines of playing Cutthroat to get the Vow of Champions that they just got, but we just don't survive lethal, so we have to play Rapture. Unfortunately, there was just really no hope on this situation. The key moment in the game, I believe, was when they hit that reflection, the second Reflection Elementalist, getting that board state the way it was. It was just no point of return from my perspective. So game 1 does not go our way. It was pretty tough. So now it's time for game number 2. And I decide in this game, I'm going to re-queue. A lot of people assume that after a loss, especially with people like me who change decks a lot, that they're not going to stay the same. However, I figured that this Deception deck was really strong into his range. I thought that he might play light this game, and this deck would be favored against light. That was my thoughts. So I decide to go ahead and just hit the re-queue, and our opponent is electing to go with Nature, but with Selena's Mark. So when he picks Selena's Mark, I think what he's saying is, I think you're Hidden Rush, which could have been a meta play that I could have played, switching from Control to Hidden Rush. Hidden Rush is a variant that I'm very well known to play, and this is something that Stand Cal probably knows about me. So he knows that just because I'm queuing the same god doesn't mean I'm playing the same deck. I actually am playing the same deck this time, though I have done that as a meta play before, switching decks. So let's just go ahead and get into the game. I missed a moment here on my recording, but we're still in the mulligan phase, so you get the general gist. We're playing some controlled deception, and our opponent is playing nature. From what I thought of coming into this game, is probably more of a mid-range to low-end control variant. But here we go. We've got the turn one relic, which we love to see, and they're coming at us with a lot of speed. That's a great turn one play by our opponent, and now our hand is already kind of clunky. We've got two cutthroat insights, and what are we really doing with those? At the moment, we have like no plays, and it's pretty sad. Fortunately for us, Standing Cow doesn't have a good turn two play, not continuing to apply the pressure. If he was continuing to apply the pressure, our current hand is pretty bad. But they've got the Briar to take out my relic, which is still very annoying. So now we're in a kind of an interesting situation. If I could place Scylla Carnival Ringleader and stick her onto the board, I would love to do that. However, I felt that the most likely result if I played Scylla is it's just going to die to either a Canopy Barrage or a Lightning Strike. Keep in mind, I haven't seen what my opponent has in their hand, so I have absolutely no idea what they're holding. They play a Marshwalker, which is a great target for Bound by Her Will, and we just go ahead and go face. The other option we had there was to actually attack into the Briar and use Hunting Trap, but I have my sights set on bigger fish to fry in this matchup. So they go ahead, big moment right there for our opponent. And now I already feel kind of the heat of the situation. So I see this as kind of desperate. I'm tossing out the Scylla and just kind of praying that it sticks. He only has 2 cards in hand before I played Scylla, so I was hoping that he didn't have removal for Scylla. And if Scylla sticks on the board, then it's most likely just going to kill pretty much everything that he has. And he goes ahead, interesting enough, plays the Black Jaguar, which will just die to the burn damage. He will get in 3 additional points of damage by attacking with the Jaguar if that's what he's into and probably wants to do that. Here we take the opportunity to cutthroat. We see a sudden bloom. Easy decision there. The low-hanging fruit does practically nothing. The sudden bloom, we're already getting kind of low, so that is a little bit concerning. We go ahead, Stone Skin, their biggest minion, and then everything else gets burned 5. Stone Skin prevents 4 damage. You could argue that was a bad use of a Stone Skin. You could also argue that it was probably the correct use of a Stone Skin, if you just like arguing. Our opponent plays the Moose, and the Moose is loose for our opponent. They go ahead and they're like, hey, I'm going to let you gain favor, and I'm going to deal damage to your god, and I'm going to buy the Lambasting Wand, and I'm going to try to beat you by dealing damage that way. We, of course, top deck Demogorgon, which is a decent card to top deck. We got a lot of lines here, but I think the smoothest is the one that I play. Go ahead, remove their minion, and I no rush to play the Rune of Strength. Just go ahead and go face. Keep things pretty simple. If I played the Rune of Strength without playing the Pickpocket, they could have played Lightning Strike and used their God Power to remove my minion. This way, I'm looking to play Demogorgon next turn and hopefully use that as a method to gain health. Our opponent doesn't really do much that turn, so I'm like, what are you holding? They're holding Dagon, not much else. We knew they had low-hanging fruit from earlier, so we're just going to go ahead, steal that, go face, and that's a display bug, by the way. It's not a one-cost Dagon. That is indeed a low-hanging fruit, but it's a display bug. It's been around. Whenever you cutthroat and you have a Pickpocket in the same turn, that is a very common bug. So if I was a member of Team Nevos, I would go ahead and report this game if I ended up losing it and could get a replay. But anyways, our opponent here goes ahead and they're not really doing too much. So we're just going to go ahead and go face, play Demogorgon, and go ahead and collect 3 additional health, grab the Rune of Fire, and our board is just too wide. We are threatening way too much, and ultimately there's just not going to be much Standing Cow can do in this situation, so we go ahead and notch a win. now game number, wait, I go off to the restroom. The game queued while I was in the restroom, the same deck I just played. So technically, I queued the same deck I just won, which was an illegal deck. So the interesting thing with this bug, and this is a bug with the client, is this is actually the third time this has happened with me. However, the first two times I was able to unqueue before the game actually started, and it didn't cost me anything. It's weird that when you start a game with a challenge code, it actually keeps you in the queue with the same challenge code. This has happened to me a few times, and also happened to me in one game in another match that happened after this. It's insane. It's an insane bug. But anyways, after our game, I really had to go to the restroom. So I bolted to the restroom and come back, and the game queued. It's like, it made absolutely no sense. Like, I had not actually entered the queue. Anyways, what happened in the situation is obviously we end the game and we go to mediation, right? So it's a clear game bug. Now, I want to bring up the two prior cases. And my thought process behind this, what should have happened, is based on the two other prior resolved cases from earlier in this video. To bring you up to speed, we had Devoted had a bug earlier in the tournament that was late in the game, and he was arguably losing. The game bugged, and he got credit for a win. His opponent got credit for a win, but it made absolutely no sense. We had a bug for Clay in this tournament where he played on for like 15 minutes after the bug, or a minimum of 15 minutes. It was Control Light versus Control Deception. That game did not end at 6 mana, I can tell you that much. So they go on, play on for 15 minutes. Since he loses the game, he files the bug report. So those two situations were what I would call exploitative situations. So if you're losing, you disconnect and say, oh, the game disconnect, we need to replay. That's an exploit. In Clay's situation, he played the entire game out until he lost. And then he's like, oh, I lost, bug, we have to replay. Like, that's an exploit. So we saw two situations where those two people should have gotten credit for a loss. There is no denying that. Those were bad rulings. Now, for my situation, I will say the correct ruling in a normal circumstance is to give me the loss. I'll lead with that. However, there's a principle called precedence. When you're a tournament director, you're an umpire in a sporting event. Like, for instance, if you're looking at a strike zone and you call this being a high pitch, when I throw a pitch that's right here, you shouldn't be saying anything, right? When this is a high pitch, you shouldn't look at this pitch and call it a strike. Is basically what I'm trying to say. Of course, most of my audience is international, so the baseball reference they don't get. But it's the general idea that you run your tournament with consistency. And in this situation, it was not. So when I came back, I was pretty sound and gave a very reasonable solution to the issue. The tournament organizers in this tournament have showed a huge tendency to attempt to not award games. They should have given Lord CRU a victory. They elected to do not. They gave his opponent a victory. It was absurd. Clay played on for like 15 minutes after a bug happened, and he got a rematch for no reason. It was just absolutely mind-boggling. So they seem to have a tendency to, when there's a dispute, to not rule in the game. So my solution was to eliminate the exploitative nature of what I did. So if you were claiming that what I did was an exploit, then what I offered was I was going to give my opponent my deck list before I queued. And then they can try to counter it. So I was going to be at a competitive disadvantage for game number 3. Of course, now in this tournament. My opponent didn't want that. They wanted a free win. I understand why they would want that. But my main issue here is with the tournament organizers, and they did a terrible job this tournament. And I feel like I'm the only person who's going to call them out, so I'm going to call them out. In terms of decisions, everything was inconsistent and didn't make sense. So if you are going to be calling a, you know, double win in the devoted game, which a double win is something that should never happen, never happen. And if you're going to give Clay a replay when he plays on for like 20 turns or whatever, because it's control light versus this control deception, that game did not end when that bug happened. That game lasted for like an hour and a half longer. It would have been insane. So those two situations were situations where you had a bug and then you had an exploitative action. And what I mean is, devoted probably losing when he disconnects. Okay? So you can say it's intentional, you can say it's not intentional. I'm not saying that it was intentional. I'm not saying it was intentional, but I'm saying it could have been. I'm saying it could have been. Okay? So he could have benefited from that bug. No doubt about that. Clay's situation, he absolutely benefited from it. He had the bug. He played the entire game out. Lost. And then decided, oh, well, I didn't win by free roll, so let's dispute the game. Like, come on. That's clearly an exploitative action. My game is clearly not an exploitative action, because immediately afterwards, I offered a solution that gave my opponent a competitive advantage. So it's not like I intentionally queued to see what they were playing and then like, oh, we need a rematch, and then queued a deck that counters theirs. That's not what happened. This is not what happened at all. I offered to take a competitive disadvantage because of the bug. However, despite the fact that I offered to take a competitive disadvantage, this is the one time they decide to actually do the correct ruling. But it makes no sense because the correct ruling in this case is inconsistent with all the other rulings they had this tournament. It makes no sense why the AFK queue is somehow a bigger exploitative play than, you know, disconnecting mid-game when you're losing. Or, you know, oh, I had a bug, I'm going to play on for 20 more turns. It makes absolutely no sense. So what ended up happening is I got credit for a game 3 loss. My opponent apparently queued light while I was AFK. So what I did here was I complained for about 30 minutes, which was very smart strategically for me, because it gave me time to kind of calm myself down and scout my opponent's range. I didn't meditate like Saints wanted me to do, but I'm not really a meditator. You know, if he's watching this, hey, how you doing? But anyways, I calmed myself down, and it actually got to the point where I was delaying so long that the tournament organizers and my opponent were both kind of getting tilted. I also got the very big hunch that I could predict my opponent's next deck based on how irritated they were. So I was almost certain that they were going to queue an aggro magic deck. And I have a very special niche deck that is designed to beat that. Now, I'm in the Infinite Mana chat, and Saints is like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. It's a stupid idea. Okay, but people telling me this stuff is a stupid idea has never stopped me from going for it. So here is my stupid idea for game number 3, or unofficially kind of game number 4. So here I am doing my stupid little thing, playing my very niche nature deck with a narrow counter range, and my opponent is queuing magic. So I'm feeling great. I think I've just accurately predicted my opponent's deck. I feel like a genius, okay? I feel a little bit like a genius. So we're going first. We've actually gone first in all 3 games this match. So for what that is worth, keep that in mind. And we get a pretty good opening hand for our deck. Our deck is not an aggro deck. It is a control deck, a control nature list, really a heal nature list. Lots of healing, but it does have some early games so we don't get absolutely rolled as well. Designed to be a counter to the aggro magic meta. The old aggro magic meta, of course, it is what it is right now, right? So our opponent coming out here, Pyramid Warden Demetrios, this feels a lot like what I was kind of expecting. Either they're playing pretty much what I thought they would be. So they go ahead, toss out Demetrios here, and it's kind of awkward for me because if I kill their Pyramid Warden first, then they kill my Pyramid Warden, they get their Pyramid Warden back. Like, that's a pyramid scheme, by the way. Not a huge fan of that. So, very awkward Pyramid Warden dynamics here, but the longer we wait and do nothing, the more it benefits me, in my opinion. So our opponent goes ahead, plays some spell boosts onto the board. We know that they have a final draft that's at least, well, that is exactly 2 charges, so they can go ahead and they can kill my Black Jaguar with it, but instead they're going to go ahead and target my Pyramid Warden, which is interesting. They leave their Pyramid Warden with 1 health, and I can go ahead and just kill the Pyramid Warden. They go ahead and remove my Black Jaguar, but I get 1 minion back immediately by killing their Pyramid Warden. So I did win the Pyramid Wars right there, and we get the Pyramid Scheme back. Our Selena's Mark has perfect aim, and our Underbrush 4 takes out their board, and suddenly we really navigated that situation very nicely. So our opponent, who I assumed was playing like an aggro magic list, is behind on board early to the nature list, and in theory, my deck should have a much better top end than theirs. So I really like how this game is starting out to begin with. Our opponent is clinging to the rope right now, trying to figure out what to do. Obviously, nothing they have is super appealing. They go ahead with the Tracking Bolt to go ahead and remove the Pyramid Warden, Tracking Bolt, Blizzard Bolt, hoping to get something useful. They get Demetrios, so that was not what they wanted to get back. Spoiler alert, that was not what they wanted to get back. We go ahead, attack twice face, drop a Guild Enforcer, just expanding our board dominance here, and applying some pressure. And it's not great when you're the aggro deck in the aggro versus control matchup, and you're behind on board to the control deck early. It doesn't feel good. A lot of defensive spells by our opponent, so their list isn't exactly what I was thinking. So part of me wondered right now if I had misevaluated their range. Because I'm like, are they really control? Because you don't usually run those Biblio Maniacs in Super Aggro. So I'm starting to wonder with his start, is he actually an aggro deck like I thought he was, or if he's playing control, and I thought I was metaing him greatly, and I turned out to not be. And that wouldn't be the first time that's happened. But anyways, I'm going to be like, well, if you're control, I'm still going to apply some pressure here. Those 2 Guild Enforcers are very difficult to remove. There isn't like one AoE spell that just removes those. Of course, if you play the Street Conjurer and you had the Shaped Blast, that combination could have removed the Guild Enforcer. So he goes ahead and he gets Scylla off of the situation there. So now he's going to go all out to try to protect Scylla, which is a very interesting strategy. Unfortunately for our opponent, he did not know about the Vow of Champions in hand, a card that not many people are big on except me. I get made fun of for putting it in some of my decks sometimes, but who's making fun of who right now? I know, a Canopy Barrage would have been more effective, but hey, it is what it is. So we're still applying the pressure here. Our opponent doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. They pip to 7. They've got the Unbound Flames, which kills everything except 1 Guild Enforcer. So that was a very effective play by our opponent. However, they don't have that much left in their hand, and we are still the ones applying pressure. Go ahead, and we're going to go to the Sanctum to buy an Ambitious Adventurer, get a little bit deeper into our list, go ahead and toss the Avatar of Nature, so we are wide once more. Now, second Unbound Flames is indeed a board wipe, so, do they have the second Unbound Flames, or do they not? And they do not, because they go ahead and play the Worm Breath, and they use their God Power. Unfortunately for Standing Cow, he's getting pretty low on health. We're going ahead, just chipping away here, grab the Vow of Champions from the Sanctum, and I'll go ahead and play 1 Beetle. You could argue that playing 0 Beetles was the correct move, but I thought single target removal on the Guild Enforcer was a line. And if they had AoE, they probably would have played it last turn. So here we are effectively threatening lethal if Guild Enforcer gets through, if the Beetle and the Adventurer get through. They go ahead, they use the unannounced arrival, which is kind of a desperation play. They get nothing of use. Unfortunate for our opponent here. You don't get the same effect with unannounced arrival. You don't get the delve effect. So now they are roping here, trying to find a way out, but they can't. So now here we are in the fourth game, or the game 5 of the match, depending on how you look at it. We are in the deciding game to decide who goes on to the round of 8 and who does not go on to the round of 8. So in this situation, what I've seen from my opponent is I'm pretty sure he's either going to re-queue with nature or magic. His magic list just felt slow. His nature list felt slow. So he's won with deception and light, his two fastest decks. I got the genius idea here of if they don't have the speed, the ultimate clock is Dralamar. And I wanted to put him to the test because I didn't think he had enough speed. So in the final game, I make a risky decision and decide to go ahead and queue Dralamar. So we will go ahead and see how this gamble works out. They come out and queue Magic, like was in the range. I thought they would either queue Magic or Nature. Was feeling one of those two. We get Dralamar in opening hand, which is great. Might should keep the Shape Blast, but I'm kind of getting greedy, hoping for some ramp. And we like the Ancient Text. The reason why we like the Ancient Text is because if we go off, we love having it to protect our Dralamar. So go ahead and put those two at the bottom. Don't need them. But we've got our ramp, we've got cost reduction in form of wisdom, and we have Dralamar. So we feel pretty good about the situation. And we'll go ahead, take a peek. Don't get anything that's necessary right there. Here we can play the form of wisdom, which is clutch. Guarantee the cost reduction. Probably should have used my GP there, obviously, but elected not to. Our opponent goes ahead, plays the low horde hatchling, goes face. And the Crystal Tech Scholar. So this is looking good. We can calculate that we can play Dralamar in 2 turns. And it's going to be hard for them to kill us in 2 turns. It's the basic thing of the deck. And generally, when you play Dralamar, you just draw your whole deck and you win the game. So I feel very good that it's unlikely that they can deal 20 points of damage to me next turn. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But this is a prime opportunity to go ahead, play the Crystal Tech Warlock, Safeguard here, and just feel great about the situation. So we see the Magic Inks, which is something that I probably shouldn't keep, but you know, I'm a sucker for a good time. And so we go ahead, keep the Magic Inks, and our opponent here is in a situation they need to deal 20 when I was protected and warded, so that made the problem even more difficult. To go ahead and play the unannounced arrival, they want to probably get something a little bit disruptive on the board, maybe some armor. That would be their ideal situation. They get a minion with ward. That's not going to change too much here. They desperately toss out the Metamorphosis. And here they're just hoping I don't have the Dralamar, but probably fearing the inevitable. Indeed, I play the Dralamar, and I'm going to go ahead and spoil this, but we're going to get there. So, for those of you who are wondering, we went first in every single game. In this match, of course, we gave 1 game to them. We lost game number 1, so that's been a theme as well. But we actually went first in all 4 games that were played. And if you would like a little bit of a happy ending, the beneficiaries of the other situation, the other controversial situation, Devoted and Clay, both of them lost in the round of 16. So they did not make it past this round, despite getting the benefits of the controversial situation. We are making it through our controversial stance, advancing to the round of 8. I know I'm supposed to be pretty dramatic here and say, oh, there's excitement to the situation, but I mean, watching this play out is more of a formality than of an excitement. So we advance to the round of 8, which is huge. This is, again, the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained. So you want to make it as far as possible. And ultimately, we just have lethal here, and it feels great to make it so that one bug didn't cost us. And you wonder what if. There is no more what if. There is only what had happened, and what had happened was we now advance to the round of 8. After what was truly a wild and insane round of 16 against Stand Cow that you could not have scripted, we end up facing off with Swally in the round of 8. This is the final round of day number 1 of the tournament, because day number 1 we played down from the round of 32 to the final 4. So it's been a long day of Gods Unchained for most people. I mean, I had a bye and then quite a wild match. And Swally is based somewhere in Europe, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on his timeline, but I think he is somewhere in Europe. Either way, me and Swally have met in one prior tournament to my knowledge, and Swally won that matchup. And when I lose in tournament matchups to people, I tend to like to even the score, get them a bad taste in their mouth. So this was a person who I wanted to seek revenge on, and what better time to seek revenge than in the biggest tournament in Gods Unchained history. Coming into this matchup, Swally has a relatively wide range of decks. So coming out in game number 1, I don't have a particularly great hard counter. My gut instinct was that he would probably end up queuing Light. So I thought that Deception was my best bet. Now, I have an anti-Light Deception build if I was very confident he was queuing Light. And I have a Hidden Rush build, which is kind of flippy in that matchup. I elected to pick Control Deception. Control Deception in this matchup for me is something that I would consider maybe a slight favorite against most Light builds, but it can kind of clunk out. It's not necessarily what I would call a hard counter, but I felt like this was very good against his range. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and see what Swally queues, and what do you know? He queues Light. So I should have gone with my hard counter version. This is not the correct version. We're going second, which is not the correct decision making, but that opening hand looks pretty great. Umber Arrows, you can typically get great value because most of their minions are strength 2 or less, and if you can trade one and get them to trade into each other, then you can really impact their early board. And Armor Lurker is the best possible card to have, and Bound by Her Will almost always has targets in this matchup. So we go ahead, play the Armor Lurker on one going second. That is the clear optimal thing to do. They go ahead and drop the Pacifist, and the Pacifist is kind of a key minion for our opponent. Here is kind of a very awkward turn. We have a lot of options, and I'm going to take a long think on this turn. I can either decide to attack their 1/1 and kill it, or I ended up doing this line. I ended up with an awkward 1/1 Pacifist, which could be pretty exposed to a lot of different things that our opponent could definitely do. However, usually they just end up Light Levying it, and they've got a gold one, so they can flex that on us. So that turn worked out very effectively for our opponent. Now here, I make a very questionable decision. I'm going to use my final pip and play the Inconspicuous Carriage. I could have just God powered away their 1/1 and saved my pip. That way I could Rapture Dance one turn earlier. That might have been the exact move I should have done. Instead, our opponent gets a 4-wide board and drops the Holy Writ, and they can actually deal with that Inconspicuous Carriage rather easily. So that turn went perfectly for my opponent. And here I am, just dropping another carriage, hoping for the best. But sometimes when you hope for the best, the worst happens. They've got the card that gives the order, and they can just flat out ignore. And now is the point of the game where it's getting a bit of a sweat here. It's doesn't feel particularly great from my end. I'm just like, how do I survive a Rapture Dance? Of course, I use my pip turn earlier than potentially necessary, and we might be seeing the effects of that decision right now, because normally I would be 1 turn away from Rapture Dancing. Now I'm 2 turns, and our opponent already has a 6 wide board. So this is a very uncomfortable situation. About all we can do is just God Power away their minion, and yeah, that pretty much ends the turn. I could have played an Umber or a Hunting Trap, but there's not much to be gained by doing that. So now our opponent, there are out of cards, they are playing off the top of their deck, and they just go ahead and make a minion bigger. However, if you notice, if we had the access to our pip right now, we could pip Rapture Dance and we win the game. It's literally that simple. But we do not have access to the Rapture Dance, so that pip into the Inconspicuous Garage is looking like a very inconspicuous play mistake in this game for myself. So we go ahead, utilize the Hunting Trap and the God Power, try to remove as many minions as we can, even though if we utilize the Umber Arrow instead of the God Power, we could have technically removed 1 more. And our opponent playing off the top of their deck, we think that we're probably going to be able to Rapture Dance next turn and take over the game, except they top deck Prayer of the Desperate at the exact perfect time to top deck Prayer of the Desperate. So that hurts, personally. We go down to 5, and we draw Guild Enforcer, but Guild Enforcer does nothing in this exact situation. They just attack with 2 minions and kill it. The Rapture does nothing because they just fought Form of Power in the Sanctum. Conceding was optimized there. And our opponent is going to go ahead and remove our minion. So we end up losing game number 1. And, you know, I didn't notice this at the time. And this is one situation where ignorance is bliss. I go back and I review the games of a lot of my big tournaments to try to figure out how I can improve. And rewatching your own games and seeing where you went wrong is the best way to improve in chess and probably in Gods Unchained as well. As we saw in that game, if I had better pip management and saved the pip and had just one slightly awkward, unoptimized turn, then we could have Rapture Danced on 5.5. If we Rapture Danced on 5.5, we win that game. That Prayer of the Desperate that he top decks is nothing. And just judging by what we drew the rest of the game, I feel like we win that with relative ease, and we would be up 1-0. But again, ignorance can be bliss. I didn't notice at the time that I punted the game. I'm just like, well, he top decked like a madman and is a luck box. And then you go into balance chat, blah, 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 Prayer of the Desperate, blah, 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 blah. And of course, that's exactly what I did in between games because, you know, that's what you do. So, entering game number 2, it's, you know, I still have him on a relatively wide range of decks. And I was kind of fine with the deck that I just queued. So let's go ahead, get back in there, and bam. Okay, so here's a situation that is pretty unique. So in the Infinite Mana Discord, we have opinions on ranges of decks that we consider very good. Everyone in the Discord entering the tournament said that Aggro War was a top tier deck. Aggro Relic War, I should say. So Relic War was a top tier deck. And then all of us had various forms of deception and magic we like. Personally, for myself, the only version of magic I ever liked was Dralamar. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. There are certain situations that you can't get away with queuing it. However, in the Discord, there was a little birdie chirping in my ear about this control magic. He may or may not have been named Saints. Possibly. And after enough chirping, I actually listened to his suggestion, which is something that I rarely do, listen to other people's suggestions. I'm a pretty stubborn person. So he convinced me to play Control Magic in game number 2. We're already down 1-0. Based on what we thought was remaining in Swally's range, Saints said that Control Magic was favored against everything. And then I'm like, well, what if he plays Control Deception? And Saints was like, we can beat it. And I'm like, I don't think we can. But I ended up listening to them anyways. And guess what? We get the matchup that I was doubting Saints on. I doubted him here. Control Magic. And we're up against Deception. And I'm expecting Control Deception. And if we're up against Control Deception, I don't see how we win. But I guess this is why we play the games. So anyways, this game we elect to go first, which is unique. It is definitely unique for us. And we go ahead, and you can see we've got Shadow Scryer, we've got Alcorith, and all that stuff. Our opponent opens a turn 1 with Armor Lurker, which is one of the best minions Deception can have for an early game. We just toss out a second Shadow Scryer to give him more targets for Bound by Her Will. Of course, that's what he's got. No surprise there. The surprise is that he interesting double attacked into that. I'm not saying that's incorrect. It's just, mildly surprising. We go ahead and just utilize the Tracking Bolt onto the Armor Lurker. Don't really know what else I'm going to do here. And he goes ahead and, of course, attacks the Shadow Scryer. And, you know, they're playing probably a more of a control-ish variant of Deception. So it comes down to they're not going to run us over. If we're playing a Hidden Rush variant, for instance, if were a Hidden Rush deck, we probably couldn't get away with the hand we have. They would just steamroll us. We have no AoE and no ramp. Of course, now we just drew into ramp, and getting that Leyhorde Hatchling after the card draw, that isn't really a bad draw. So we're flooding the board with tiny minions, and going to be ramping up, which will be very handy. And they play Galetta, the Unyielding Friend, which is a very interesting card. It's actually gained a lot of popularity recently after an update that buffed some of the add random war cards to your hand. So people are now tossing that package in their Control Deception list. I personally haven't played enough games yet to really know if that's strong or not, but it was new as of the week of this tournament. So the Unlikely Pact, and he can play all 3 cards that he got off of that Unlikely Pact. And they all get +1/+1 from the Unyielding Fiend. Unfortunately for our opponent, he hit 3 cards that all had 1 health each. And we're in a situation where we have Unannounced Arrival. So we can attack 2 of them. He did get hidden on 1, which is pretty annoying. But I want to go ahead and remove as many things as possible. Again, I'm playing more of a control-ish variant of Magic, not a super aggro variant like you would normally expect from me, or a combo variant like Dralamar, which you also might expect from me, depending on how well you know me. And here we just go ahead and utilize the Safeguard Incantation because we can, and also we expect it to at least save us 3 points of damage. Now our hand, we've got Elkorif, we've got Demogorgon. They elect to go ahead and Cutthroat. This isn't the worst Cutthroat for us. The best card in our hand, in my opinion, is actually Elkorif. They should probably take that, because we really are not in a situation where we're necessarily racing each other. It's more about value. But our opponent decides to go ahead and take the demo instead. I disagree with their decision making on this, but again, it's probably relatively minor here, whether or not I agree or disagree. So here's a situation where there's not a mana efficient way for me to play Star Shard Bolt and Crystal Tech. So I go ahead and just utilize one of the Leyhorde Hatchlings and God Power, because really targeting a minion is going to be pretty much as effective as targeting face. I'm not really winning this match by burning my opponent out. I want to actually out-resource them. But they're going to come at me with ways, another Unlikely Pact. So they've gotten 2 of them, which have generated 6 war minions. and they go ahead and play one of them. We draw Stormstress here, which is definitely a line, and it's actually going to be the line that I go with. You could argue that that was the incorrect decision, and you could also argue that the Star Bolt was the incorrect decision and that I should have traded minion in, but I am leaving myself with more minions on board and pressing from that angle. So for the first time in the game, we have a lead on the board, but our opponent has 8 cards in hand, as you see we just scrolled, and they decide that, you know, we're gonna pick up the Rune of Sight and try to get even more cards in hand to better our situation. And they go ahead, play the Rat of Reinforcement, which is somewhat interesting for sure. And we go ahead and draw the Safeguard. So there's a lot of options that we have, and we go ahead and I don't like that line. I think I misplayed that turn. I had my eye on the Rune of Strength and thought that getting the Rune of Strength on my minion and applying additional damage pressure was optimized line, but I really think I should have just drawn a card with Crystal Tech Scholar. It would have probably been a little bit smoother, but what I did was okay there. It's okay. This is actually my first time rewatching this game, so I'm kind of learning with all of you. So some of the lines, again, $10,000 tournament, there's a lot of pressure, so everything I do here isn't necessarily the optimized play. Of course, everything my opponent's going to do isn't necessarily the optimized play either. But what we are doing here is we are applying pressure, and there's certainly there certainly is justification for what I was doing. I actually top decked Demogorgon after they play Demogorgon, which is actually a pretty decent top deck. It prevents them from attacking and gaining more from Leech. And since I want to be the one applying the pressure, then this is overall pretty good for me. They, of course, end up with Wither Fingers. Wither Fingers is going to be very effective in this exact situation. It prevents me from attacking and is very, very annoying. So we go ahead, and I just want to kill everything. So we can go ahead, drop the Leyhorde Hatchling, and I think this is definitely the optimized line. Of course, we end up in an awkward situation where we've had like Elclarith in our hand the whole game, and we can't play him because we have like no cards in hand, which is very weird with this type of control magic. Normally your hand is full, but we've been dumping our hand. I may have played this game quite a bit too aggressively. Again, it's not my deck. I kind of stole it and was told to play it, and for some reason it gave in. Now, we top deck a Metamorphosis, and one thing that Saints coached me before the game was I need to get value out of the Metamorphosis, but however, he usually wants me to use those on 8 drops to get the high roll 9. I just couldn't resist on the Demogorgon that was about to die. That might have been an inaccuracy on my part. And then we top deck the Helion right after, and it's like, well, that was kind of silly. So we draw all those cards, and we do get the Gatekeeper out. Now, the Gatekeeper is a minion that you really want to remove as soon as it gets out there, because it is quite annoying. So we're basically begging for the second Rapture Dance, which would lead my Gatekeeper to 3/3. And the question is do they have like a Hunting Trap or another type of removal spell to remove the Gatekeeper alongside it? We actually coaxed them into playing a Hunting Trap, which isn't that bad, because now we play Helion Elite. Now, Helion Elite asks some questions. It's a very large minion. So they've got the Stone Skin, which was a very effective line. Now they play the Cutthroat Insight, which means they'll get Elclarith. I thought they should have taken that earlier in the game, but they took Demogorgon instead. And they go ahead, utilize the God Power here. So if we had a Metamorphosis, it would probably be a good attempt to go ahead and play it. But we're just going to go ahead and draw a couple of cards. We get absolutely nothing that really impacts the situation. And now a Hunting Trap kills my Helion Elite. And I know that's a very likely card for them to have in this situation. They go ahead and purchase the Athenian Archer from the Sanctum, and they wanted to make their Elclarith a little bit bigger. So what this is going to end up leading into is a situation that is very, very interesting. I have a lot of different plays here. One play is to use my God Power, Star Shard Bolt, and Shaped Blast, which kills the Elclarith, and then I can get 12 points of damage face, which puts them at 7. The question, of course, then becomes how much burn do I have? I go ahead and buy the wind-up roller. The card I really, really want is Metamorphosis. Of course, I do not get Metamorphosis. I end up getting Unbound Flames. And here, I've got one left in the deck. I'm desperately digging. I miss. And ultimately, this turn really looks badly misplayed on my front now. Because what I should have done if I was going to attack into the minion is I should have attacked and played Helmna, and then my minion lives. But I was going for the high roll. There weren't that many cards remaining in my deck. If I could have gotten Metamorphosis and attacked into their minion and metamorphed, then that could have been the game-breaking turn, which broke things into my advantage and won the game. Instead, our opponent just goes wide here, and now they're the ones seemingly in control of the situation. We can either play a Shaped Blast or an Unbound Flames here. And I like to go for the Unbound Flames. I'm wanting to push damage towards their face. I see the Lambasting Wand and the Sanctum, and I'm like, hey, there's an opportunity here. Let's go ahead and push damage. So we're just going to try to get our opponent to 0 health, and they're just like, hey, I'm just going to drop Guild Enforcers, okay? So Guild Enforcer, obviously a pretty effective line by our opponent. They also buy the Battle Oryx, which gives us the opportunity of a few different lines, but we like to go with the one called Shaped Blast. Use the Star Shard Bolt to remove the minion and the GP to go face. Now, our opponent is at 8. We've got Unbound Flames in hand. So they go ahead and play another Guild Enforcer, and they go ahead and Lady Marcella. So now I'm in an awkward situation here. Actually, I have lethal if I'm able to attack with a minion and go face, which is kind of unique. And here I'm just like, well, he probably won't get a frontline. 2 of the 3 options were frontline. If all 3 were frontline, I might have made a kind of a big mistake there, you could have said. But they weren't all frontline, and we had the opportunity to get lethal, and we go ahead and get lethal. So now we're in a situation where we are tied 1 game each. It ended up being a situation where Saints was right, that Control Magic could indeed beat the Control Deception deck that I was afraid of. And, you know, hey, helped out there. We got a W. Now it comes into what should we queue for game number 3. And game number 3, again, I pretty much have my opponent on the similar range that I had them on in game number 1. But I really don't know what to do. I decided here that since they didn't really have a Dralamar in their range, Swally's not really a player who loves to play combo. So I thought I could get away with Control Light, which is very, very greedy. We're going to have a long control match is what I thought. So let's go ahead, see what we get here, and they queue Magic. So Magic can either be an aggro variant, it could be a surprise Dralamar, and I could be absolutely wrong, or we could be in for a Control Mirror that could last forever. So we're playing Control Light. They're playing some form of Magic. We do not know. And I think Optimized Play is actually keeping the Inescapable Duty in my hand, but I mulliganed it, which is probably wrong. I think I was slightly worried about potentially facing an aggro Magic list, so that's why I did what I did. And here it's quite evident that this is Control v Control, as both sides have just kind of stared at each other for a while. Now we both decide to actually finally play things, and I can give stuff orders for days, and they're going to go ahead and remove my minion, which is no surprise. So we draw Lips Are Sealed, play a Guild Enforcer. We, of course, would like a board presence when we can achieve it, and they're just going to go ahead and be like, that Guild Enforcer, we can get right by it. And fighting hard for the early board. Now I draw Inescapable Duty. Now the question is do we play Elcorith or do we play Inescapable Duty? We played Elcorith. Now you could argue that Inescapable Duty could potentially make Elcorith a little bit bigger, but I thought playing the dragon was very strong in this instance, as it was pretty difficult for our opponent to deal with. Now they're going to go ahead, they're going to go wide, and that's going to be relatively annoying. Here I have a situation where I can play Inescapable Duty and get value. Those two minions are pretty effective, and we go ahead and grab both of the Void. You could argue going face here, but I think that peeling the minion is still the best option. I'm playing control. I think I can win the late game as long as I obliterate the correct cards. Once I get my infinite combo cycle going, I should be able to just outvalue my opponent. At least that's why I hope coming into this game. Because unless our opponent has teched for this matchup specifically, this deck holds up very well in Control Mirrors because you have infinite combos at the end of the game. You always have something to do. Once you get to the end game. Early game, you don't always have something to do. Here, I mean, a 5/7 Guild Enforcer is a nuisance. And I go ahead and play Gleam Weaver. The reason is I've got CERN, so I know I have some potential card draw potential coming up soon, and I want to make sure that I don't overdraw. So that's the reason behind playing Gleam Weaver. Obviously, Gleam Weaver wasn't teched for this matchup. It was teched for other potential decks in our opponent's range. They go ahead and play Elcorith, and we're holding 2 Divine Judgments, so this seemed like the perfect opportunity to get one out of my hand. And now, it's kind of a unique situation because we're the one pressing. We're pressing forward, and we've got 2 very difficult minions to deal with. A 5/7 with 1 armor and a 4/6 with 1 armor. And we've got Helmna, which can come down next turn, which can heal if you just damage them. So we even though we're playing Control Light, we're in a situation where we feel like we can be the aggressor, and it's probably optimized for us to be the aggressor. Very unique situation for Swally, who probably knew this matchup, but is probably a little bit surprised by the angle I am taking this. They go ahead and they damage some of my stuff. Double unannounced arrival. Really hoping to get something good, I believe. And they do get the spell boost, which might be helpful somewhat to our opponent. However, I see the opportunity here. We have the opportunity to play Helmna and just have a absolutely ridiculous Helmna. So it heals all of my minions up to full health. That's a 10-8 Helmna. That really poses the question now. Obviously, they can't just play a Hylian Elite. They have Unbound Flames, which is probably the best card they could have in this situation. Unfortunately for us, we don't really draw a helpful card. And we can't play CERN because we can't give anything order. So a very bad turn. But we still are the aggressors here, which is kind of weird saying with Control Light. So they go ahead, play the Shaped Blast, and play another minion here. Now, I play the CERN purely to heal my Guild Enforcer. That's the only reason. Of course, we've got Censure and Lips are sealed in hand, so we have ways to give order to stuff that annoys us. And go ahead, just pass the turn. No reason to waste Ukos and Eclipse and actually worsen my board. Now they play Hylian Elite. Hylian Elite, obviously a very big card. Now, it's not enough just to give order to Hylian Elite, because then they can just Metamorphosis next turn, and I don't want to give him that out. So we go ahead, remove the Hylian Elite, remove the potential of the Metamorphosis into Avatar of Magic, and KO. We got our opponent down to 2 health, and now they need to deal with our entire board. They play another Hylian Elite. They pip into the Metamorphosis. Unfortunately for our opponent, even an Avatar of Magic doesn't save them there, because here we can just go ahead, Lips are sealed, and our 2/2 goes ahead and finishes off that game. Alright. So now we're entering game number 4. And game number 4, again, I talked a pre-match about what kind of the discussion between Infinite Mana players was on coming into this. tournament, we all agreed that Aggro War was one of the top decks that was the hardest to counter. One of the hardest to counter. We agreed on Deception being very strong, though disagreed on which versions of Deception were very strong. And we all agreed that Magic was very strong. Well, they all agreed. I thought that Magic was niche Dralamar stuff, but I ended up taking Saints deck in game number 2, and it worked. But that was kind of their perspective of highly ranked decks. Now, in game number 4, I still think my opponent's range is relatively wide, but I have noticed I don't think that they're really teching in Relic Hate, so I thought that this was a great opportunity to just go all in and go for it with Relic War. So let's go ahead and see how this works here. Don't want demos in our opening hand, obviously, and don't want expensive stuff. We have a Relic. The Auric Rush, not particularly in this matchup, and Blitz minions aren't particularly great in this matchup. I like the bar fight against Magic, because when they play Safeguard and Incantation, that plus God Power kind of opens up the floodgates for you. So we draw Unrestrained Power, which is definitely a card that we would like to see. And here, I had the option of pipping out the Blade of Sticks. Elected not to, just use the God Power. Kind of a passive line. You could have argued playing the Tavern Brawler. You could have argued a lot of things on that turn. However, we elected to do pretty much nothing. So our opponent uses the GP, and now we draw a second Unrestrained Power. Now our plan is very simple. Assuming they don't have Relic Hate or Frontline, we play the first Unrestrained Power, and then if they have no tricks, we play the second Unrestrained Power, and the game is over. It's usually not that simple. Usually they play a Frontline here, and then you have to go ahead and trade off the Relic for the Frontline, but we've got a second Unrestrained Power, so that's actually fine. But we are going all in here for the win, and our opponent kind of desperately metamorphosing, which signals that they do not have a Frontline. And that was a very desperate play. I think they can kind of sense, because I played the Unrestrained Power, that I probably have a second one. They probably already know this. However, if you don't have a Frontline, there's no way to prevent the situation. And the situation is, that's turn 5 lethal. And the next thing you know, we have advanced to the round of 4, surviving through one very tough day of Gods Unchained action, getting revenge against Stand Cow, getting revenge against Swally, and now we advance to the final 4. So now we have made it to the final 4 of the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained. And who do we have next? None other than my own teammate, Infinite Mana's own Sam Bam. So going into this matchup, I know pretty much what's in his range. He knows pretty much what's in my range. We have seen the same Infinite Mana charts and stats and stuff like that, and have probably pretty similar evaluations on a lot of things. So, metagaming for this is closer to a coin flip. A lot of the RNG is just going to depend on how, things go. Who goes first? Stuff like that really, really matters when it's going to be tight. So we know entering this matchup is going to be a tight matchup. So for game 1, I wanted to keep things simple. I wanted to play a deck that I felt like queued in best to a wide range. So I'm going to pick War in game number 1. And guess what? Sam Bam had the exact same thought process. So he cues War, I cue War, and let's get this War on the road. Unfortunately, we're going second in game number 1. We get the Unrestrained Power, which is the exact card that we want in our opening hand. And in this matchup, I don't particularly like the Magic Missile Launchers, though you could have argued keeping them in our opening hand over the Blitz Minion for sure. But Unrestrained Power is one of the key cards if we want to have a chance to win here. And we have that in our opening hand. Unfortunately, Auric Rush and Tavern Brawler are not so good in this matchup. So here, I decided to go ahead and pip out the Tavern Brawler. The reason behind this is if I can achieve any chip damage out of the Tavern Brawler, I'm feeling like I'm accomplishing a lot. And I'm hoping that it's just not worth his turn to go ahead and kill that. Any extra damage I can pick up could make the difference in the game. He uses his only pip to play the Blade of Sticks, and he removes the Tavern Brawler. Now I'm in a situation where I don't really have a great play this turn, so I just have to God Power pass. Almost accidentally played the Bar Fight, which would have been very bad and wasteful, and actually would have gotten less damage in. Sam Bam also has a pretty bad turn, so neither of us are doing great, and he just God Power pass. Now we draw Blade of Sticks, and here I see, well, I could Unrestrained Power next turn and hit for 10, and that might be the optimized line. I could hit for 10, and potentially have a few turn lethal. So I'm going to go ahead, pip out the Auric Rush to make his math a little bit worse. I feel like that is the correct line, but I fully intend to play the Unrestrained Power and race. So we actually feel like we're doing pretty decent here. Of course, if we draw a Whetstone, we would have a 2-turn lethal. If we draw an Unrestrained Power, we'd have a 2-turn lethal from here. And it's quite evident that Sam Bam is well further out than 2 turns. He goes ahead, uses God Power, and plays a minion. So that shouldn't deter me from my plans. My plans should be relatively simple: Unrestrained Power and go to the face. Now he plays Whetstone, which is a sign that he does have Unrestrained Power. And if he has Unrestrained Power, he's got lethal in 2 turns. Or most likely has lethal in 2 turns. So I go ahead and play my Unrestrained Power with the knowledge that I need to either top deck a Whetstone or an Unrestrained Power next turn, or I probably end up losing. Because we know most likely, since he played Whetstone last turn, he probably has Unrestrained Power. Unfortunately, since he had Whetstone with his Unrestrained Power, his relic is a little bit more significant. So it's going to be 18, 20 with the Vanguard Axewoman. He puts me down to 6, which means that he has a lot of ways to win next turn if he swings. Now he's hesitating here, which basically telegraphs that he probably has a second Unrestrained Power. Very interesting situation here. Probably calculating whether or not I can buy the Shield Maiden in the Sanctum, and I can kill his Vanguard Axewoman. I can go face, but I can only get up to 12 favor. I need to get up to 13 favor. So we have a chance to top deck for the win, and we do not. We top deck Mobilize. So we're in a situation now where we are 1 favor short and 2 points of damage short of lethal from the double bar fight lethal. The fact that he didn't attack last turn makes me very confident that he probably has lethal. He probably has the other Unrestrained Power and is just going to kill us. So here, I do the only thing that I can do: play the double bar fight, utilize the God Power, and pray. This line is... It's something, but I go ahead. I know the inevitable. We get the concede bar up. He shows the Unrestrained Power, and yeah, I've been there before. So we find the concede button, and game number 1 goes against us. So now entering game number 2, I know that Sam Bam's range is a little bit more of control-ish oriented decks than my personal range. And because that he already got the win with his fastest deck that I thought that he would bring, which was the Aggro War List, I thought I had the opportunity here to sneak a Dralamar game in. So we're queuing up with Magic. He's queuing up with Magic. So I either think I'm up against a Control Magic list, or I'm up against Dralamar. Since he picked Mage Bolt, I think I'm up against Control Magic. So this is a great matchup for us. We're mulliganing, looking for combo pieces. Now, I'm mulliganing away the Shape Blast. That's a moment that we may want to remember in this game. Definitely a card that I could have kept for sure. They go ahead, play the Pyramid Warden on turn 1. Now, the optimized play for me here is actually to pip out Sip of Elixir. I make the incorrect play, and that could end up mattering as well. Foreshadowing quite a bit here, but he's got the double Pyramid Warden open, which, if I think he's playing control, that's probably one of the better opens he can have. We draw Dralamar. Next turn's going to be pretty simple. We're definitely going to Librarian's Prayer. But they're coming at us with some speed here, and that's something that we need to realize. So we draw the Form of Wisdom, and I make a play mistake here. I use the God Power. I had to play a Librarian's Prayer. I've got 3 pips. This is just horrendous gameplay on my part. I could have played Librarian's Prayer, set up the Form of Wisdom, and maybe set up some additional ramp. And now I'm debating on whether or not to keep Shape Blast or not. Playing Safeguard Incantation in this situation is absolutely worthless. And now we draw into Crystal Tech. So we could have set up our draws perfectly. Then there's a good chance I could have played Form of Wisdom this turn, and then Crystal Tech Scholar and Crystal Tech Scholar. So what we're seeing here in a big Final Four situation, in the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained, I am playing this game absolutely horrendously. And will that make a difference? Well, I don't have the Form of Wisdom set up. I need the cost reduction, so ramping doesn't get me any closer. If I had used my pips effectively, since I'm going second, I used them. Notice I've used 0 this game. If I use them effectively, I think I could have set up everything to where I could play both Crystal Techs, and then my opponent would have to kill me next turn. He probably doesn't have lethal next turn, but I still have to set everything up. So we see the Vow of Champions. The Vow of Champions is what it is. It's a pretty good card. But here I have to survive. And here's a situation where I need to play Reject Dogma, and I need to use my pip to heal for 4. Now, will I find that line? Of course not. We're making all the wrong decisions in this game. So we're going to empower the Reject Dogma to kill 1 minion, but I really should have healed for 4. That way I could heal for 4 and ramp, and potentially do some other things as well. But yeah, that's the situation. So now he can come forward for 8 points of damage at a minimum, and we are not very close to doing much of anything. Now next turn I can play the Crystal Tech, Pip, and Vow of Champions. But where are we really getting here? It just doesn't feel like we're making any progress whatsoever. So Sambam going forth with all the minions that he can, which makes sense, of course, using the Mage Bolt God Power, which of course also makes sense. And he's threatening lethal. So that's pretty much the situation. And we draw Ether Snap. I can play the Crystal Tech. I can pip out the Vow of Champions. But that doesn't do anything. So this is a game that you definitely come to regret. You know, we think about this match. We're down 0-1 right now. Opportunity to tie this match up and, you know, going to another game. This game, we did absolutely everything wrong. Without a doubt, one of the worst tournament games I have ever played. I mean, I have the win if I pilot it, and I have no one to blame but myself. It's just relatively simple. It's just absolutely horrendous pit management, and you get what you deserve. We come up a turn short. You can blame going second all you want, but I mean, if you're going second, use your pips. Now, we're in a tough spot. We're down 2-0. It's not what we want to be against anybody. But I do have all my decks available to me. So going into the next game, I just want to keep things very simple and not do anything stupid. So how do I not do anything stupid? Well, I decide that, hey, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down with one of my best decks. And one of my best decks is indeed the Relic War list. Of course, there's a good chance Sambam anticipated this list as well. And we're going second for the 3rd consecutive game. That's not a good feeling. One thing we have to worry about here is there's a good chance that he prepped in some counterfeits. I don't know how greedy he got, but now we see this hand, and this hand is the ultimate combo. If he has no way to disrupt it, we just win. Of course, what do we see in the Sanctum? None other than a Nightleaf Trapper. Disastrous Sanctum item, which puts us in a very awkward spot. He plays the Patient Pickpocket and another Patient Pickpocket, which is very interesting, and I draw a Carnage Sweep. All we can do here is pass. So he will be copying 2 cards from my hand. It could be, pretty much anything here, right? So they go ahead, copy a couple of cards, and we end up at the situation we draw useless stuff. And what I don't like here is he's going to be getting all the favor by going face, and there's not much I can do. Now, you could have argued last turn I probably should have played Savage Strike to kill one of his minions and prevent him from gaining as much favor. Do I win the race for the Nightleaf Trapper? I probably don't, but you might say I should have gone for that anyways. Here, Sam Bam goes ahead and hides the minion, and I'm in a situation where I'm like, well, he's got Nightleaf Trapper, so I assume what he's going to do is he's going to buy the Nightleaf Trapper, and I'm going to pip out Carnage Sweep. That seemed to be the logical line of continuation. However, that's not how it always goes. And here is a critical situation where Sam Bam is going to return the favor of the gift I gave him with my misplays from last game, and he's going to go ahead and make a misplay of his own. He has the opportunity to buy the Nightleaf Trapper, which slows me down immensely, forces my hand to the Carnage Sweep, and then I really have no plan of action moving forward. Instead, he's like, why go for the Carnage Sweep when I am an aggro deck? And he's going to make a very interesting decision here and buy a Lambasting Wand from the Sanctum. This is the incorrect line. I think what he thought here is he thought that he could get to the Nightleaf next turn, and he noticed I took a turn off from attacking, anticipating the Nightleaf, so he probably thought that I had Carnage Sweep. So he might have had a correct read, but just because he had the correct read doesn't mean that he made the correct decision. Now, I'm in a situation right now where I'm like, well, he can very easily obtain 12 favor plus 3 more with his relic, 15 favor, which can buy the Nightleaf Trapper from the Sanctum. Now, I need to figure out a way to deny him as much favor as possible, because if he's able to get to 13 favor, I'm screwed. But if I kill 2 of his minions, he can only get to 12 favor next turn. And that's the key mathematics behind the situation. So I'm going to kill a minion with the most strength, the 2-attack minion. Let's keep that fact in mind, because the original plan was to take out the pickpocket. I decide to go face, and I pip out the God Power. The reason why is I calculate 2-turn lethal. I'm going to Whetstone plus Unrestrained Power and hit him for 20, and then the turn after that, I am going to use my God Power and kill him. Of course, unfortunately for me, what pops up in the Sanctum but Vow of Champions. So we have our clear game plan, and Sam Bam goes face a couple of times, now thinking here, and he plays Whetstone, and he's gonna play another Whetstone. So those were the 2 cards that he stole from me. Interesting, if he stole a Whetstone and Unrestrained Power, he could have beat me that way, which would have been a very interesting way to go out of the tournament. Now we're down to 7, but we're effectively down to 5 because of the situation. So this is a tough spot. So we know we can go down to 5. He can attack with his 2 minions, and he's got Vow of Champions, so he can get me to 1 next turn. However, if he gets me to 1 next turn, then I kill him. So I'm in a situation now where I have to figure out whether or not I want to play Carnage Sweep. Do I want to go with my original plan of Whetstone and Unrestrained Power and go for the 2-turn lethal? What do I want to do to move forward in the situation? So I spend a reasonable amount of time to come here, try to process through all of my options. I think the best option is still to play the Whetstone plus Unrestrained Power and just hope he doesn't have lethal. And I don't see another clear path forward. I know that he can at minimum get me to 1 with the Vow of Champions in the Sanctum, and I just gotta hope that he can't get me any lower. So we push all of our chips in the middle, we put him down to 2, and we just hope for the best now. So we know he can attack with the 2 Patient Pickpockets, which gets me down to 3. He can buy the Vow of Champions, which may or may not kill me. So here I go ahead, I've got my mouse over the cog in the top right hand corner, getting ready to concede. Sam Bam a little bit timid right now, so it doesn't feel like he has lethal. He obviously knows I've got the Slayer God power, so he can kind of anticipate that, hey, I probably need to heal myself up just a tad. So he goes ahead, utilizes the Vow of Champions, and of course, as you can see by my hand, unless I top deck Whetstone, I actually do not have lethal. So I think that since he doesn't have lethal here, he's pretty much forced to heal his god for 4. Now, the one amazing thing I want to point out this game is that Nightly Trapper has been in the Sanctum the entire game and has not been purchased, which is mind-boggling. We top deck Orcish Elite, now we have another decision. One of the potential cards he could be holding right now is Counterfeit. It's actually a very likely card for him to have. So I have to decide whether or not I want to play around Counterfeit or not. I elect that I don't really have time to play around cards. We know that he didn't have lethal last turn. The only way he could have lethal right now is if he has the Counterfeit. So I YOLO. I go ahead. I think he has it. I'm hovering him through the string. He goes ahead. He attacks twice. We're both down to 1 HP. He flashes the GGs. I'm expecting the Counterfeit. I'm expecting the Counterfeit. I'm expecting the Counterfeit. Okay, since he didn't slap it down immediately, maybe he doesn't have the Counterfeit. And it looks like we go ahead and notch the win in game number 3. So now we're down 2-1. So a little bit of a fun story time for my viewers. See, in the Infinite Mana chat, we disagree on some decks. And for those of you who know me very well and have been regular viewers of my channel, of my past videos from my old channel, you know that I have a Hidden Rush addiction. I love me some Hidden Rush. And whenever I suggest Hidden Rush in the Infinite Mana Discord, it gets shot down because nobody else likes the deck at all. They're like, this is just too much of a coin flip. It's terrible. It gets countered by this. 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 It gets countered by every deck in existence. Yet I have a good run rate. I have a good win rate with it. Also, on my Tinder profile, it says under interest that I love giving knives to cats. For some reason, that hasn't helped with my swipe ratio. But, you know, maybe someday it will. Maybe I'll meet somebody someday who also likes giving knives to cats. That is a possibility. So, the way these Infinite Mana versus Infinite Mana matches works is we're actually not communicating with our team prepping. Or at least I wasn't. Maybe Sam Bam was, but I definitely was not. So, it's kind of like the Chinese national ping pong situations where, you know, our coaches aren't talking to us. And that means it's Hidden Rush time. I can play Hidden Rush, and nobody's going to tell me not to play Hidden Rush. I can't resist it. I can't resist it. I have an addiction. I have a problem. But whose problem is it? He cues Deception once more, and Hidden Rush is favored against Control Deception. It just is. It's a good matchup for me, because I get a knife, and I get a cat, and there's nothing he can do about it, because you're not going to live to Rapture Dance. So, I get the matchup, and look at that. We've got a golden knife, and we have a beautiful cat. And we got a makeshift shiv, which helps us in the favor race, which is very important, because whenever you're playing Hidden Rush, Vulcan's Discovery always appears in the Sanctum. The GU team has some impressive programming, which guarantees that Vulcan's Discovery is in the Sanctum when you play Hidden Rush. Amazing job programming by the GU team. So I don't want my opponent to get the makeshift shiv because they can get favor. Again, their only chance to win this game is obviously in the Sanctum. They must win the race for the Vulcan's Discovery. However, I will be getting the first attack in here. We've got a knife. We have a Whisper Baron here, which is very interesting. Do we play the knife on the cat? Yeah, we play the knife on the cat. We are men of culture on this channel. And go ahead, use the shiv to kill his minion. That's mostly a play. The Gleamweaver, not a super important minion, but I just want to deny him favor. Again, the most important thing is to race for the Valkus Discovery in the Sanctum. If I win the race for the Valkus Discovery in the Sanctum, I don't see how I lose the game. So they go face, and they don't have another play, and yeah, we top deck another Dark Knives. So we have a cat, and now the cat has 2 knives. And it's fun to give cats 2 knives, which is cool. So there's really not much he can do. I've got a cat with 2 knives, and Deception does not have ways to answer that situation until they get up to 6 mana. So they're not winning the race for the Dark Knives. He got a golden Dark Knives as well, which means he got that from the Patient Pickpocket. The advantage of running gold cards is I know that he got it off of the Pickpocket. Or I have a hunch that he got it off of the Pickpocket. Here, I have nothing to worry about. He's not going to get to enough mana in time. I go ahead, pick up the Valkus Discovery in the Sanctum. So you could say that, oh, he could play Sleep and then he could Rapture Dance. But if he plays Sleep this turn, I Valkus Discovery and have lethal that way. So there's no outs for Sam Bam here. And now, in the final 4, we go to a Game 5 situation. An intra-squad game number 5. It's what you love to see, isn't it? It's what you love to see. So the excitement comes out there, and you know, I go back to my basics from earlier in the match, where I thought that his range was relatively control-based. I thought that he probably was going to be scared to queue the same Control Deception deck 3rd game in a row. I mean, do you really want to lose 3 times in a row with the same deck in the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained? Some people do. Some people don't. The answer is, Sam Bam does. He queues the exact same deck again. I'm playing Dralamar Magic. So, this matchup is kind of an artsy matchup. I have to time everything perfectly, and they're playing their game around their cutthroats. If they don't draw their cutthroats in time, or I draw my Dralamar too soon and get it ripped by their cutthroat, then I lose. I don't keep the Trial Begins in this matchup because it's a bad card. If I Trial Begins and pick out Dralamar, he cutthroats me, and then, you know, BG's, because there is no more game after that. We got the ramp. The ramp is very useful. I keep the Shaped Blast this time around because, again, I'm expecting kind of a longer game, and I want to have a little bit of survivability. We use our GP here, and so I really don't want to draw Dralamar. So I don't put things at the bottom of my deck at as fast of a rate as normal. Because if I put both cards at the bottom, then I draw into Dralamar, I lose if he draws Cutthroat, and he's using the flip God Power, so his chances of drawing a Cutthroat are very high. So Form of Wisdom is a very important card. And I go ahead and elect to do nothing. The reason why I do nothing is I can play Crystal Tech next turn, and then I can use the GP and set up the form the next turn. So if I keep both cards, I don't have to worry about potential situations where I accidentally draw into Dralamar. That's what we're trying to prevent here. They go ahead and flip. I fully expect him to be able to find at least one Cutthroat. There's a chance that I have to play around 2 Cutthroats in this game. It's a tough matchup if he draws both Cutthroats. But if he gets one, usually I'm able to artsy myself around 1 Cutthroat. We already have 1 Form of Wisdom. We know we're probably going to need a second, or maybe an Ether Fox. We've got Ether Foxes available as well. So we draw the Form of Wisdom. We're going to go ahead and hit the 4C button here, try to set up the situation, and we see a Recovered Knowledge and a Librarian's Prayer. Honestly, that is absolutely fantastic. We can go ahead, play the Form of Wisdom, which sets up one of the key cards, and go ahead and ramp some more, which gets us a little bit closer to where we need to be. So the Recover Knowledge is part of the combo. However, there's a good chance that we're going to get Cutthroated. I know he's probably going to Cutthroat me next turn. Like, almost guaranteed. If he has the Cutthroat, he's probably going to play it. So now we're going to be in a situation where we need to think here. And this is another situation where I make the wrong play, in my opinion. So maybe I'm hard on myself here. So here we see two useless cards. Very easy to put both of those on the bottom. And that sets up the Librarian's Prayer. So we want to set up a situation where we can basically win the game if he doesn't have his things. Unfortunately, what we have here is nothing very useful. So the card I should keep here is Recovered Knowledge, because I can play Recovered Knowledge and potentially hit the Form of Wisdom in my Void. I make a huge play mistake getting rid of the Recovered Knowledge. I kept the Cram because I thought drawing more cards would be better. And I didn't even protect against Dralamar here, really. So that was just a really, really bad turn. Just flat out a bad turn. And I could have used Ancient Text and Vow of Champions to remove the Avatar of Deception, which I should be playing a little bit of defense here to give myself more time. We know he's probably going to play Cutthroat, and even if he doesn't, we don't even have Dralamar yet, so we're not even threatening lethal. So he Cutthroat here. He has to take the Recovered Knowledge. However, he knows this because he's played my deck before plenty. Sam Bam has played more games than anybody in Gods Unchained. Dude's a grinder. So he, of course, knows to take the Recovered Knowledge. That way, I've got 0 parts of the combo. So now we're in a tough situation. We draw Reject Dogma, and here we draw into a potential setup into the Form of Wisdom, and the problem here is we're under a lot of pressure, and I elect to make a play mistake here. I should kill the Avatar of Deception. That is the correct card to kill. And I should have used the Reject Dogma, and I should have used Ancient Text in the process. Instead, I do this line, killing the Guild Enforcer, which the Guild Enforcer is a very annoying minion when I go off. But when I go off, I have unlimited magic inks in my deck. I should be fine. 1 armored minion, even 2 armored minions, I've done it. You just got to click very quickly, and this is the final 4. What am I doing here playing around bugs? And he plays Elkareth. I had the opportunity to kill a bigger minion, and also an opportunity to potentially give my god protected or, something. Getting rid of the Reject Dogma was definitely the key play. Now we're in a situation where we are at 10, he's threatening 12, and the Sanctum is lethal. So I can calculate lethal here already, and I'm thinking, how can we possibly get out of here? And I thought, well, I have to hit Lucky on my Form of Wisdom, and then I have to draw into Safeguard Incantation. And that was my only thought process here, was I have to get lucky. That's the only way to prevent lethal. But yeah, Magic Inks, which, I mean, we save our pip, we can actually go off at 7 with Magic Inks, but that's one thing. We go ahead and play the Cram. The Cram gives us nothing that's going to save us in the situation. Unfortunately, all we can do is play the Vow of Champions, which heals our god for 4, but the Sanctum Ruin of Fire is going to go ahead and eliminate us. So, always disappointing to lose in the semifinals. I think I have no one to blame but myself. The Game 2 was one of the worst tournament games I've ever played in Gods Unchained. Flat out. It was one of the worst games I've ever played. If I play decently in that game, I win. And we could see, based on the cards we drew, based on how short we were in that game, if we pilot that game, we win. And if we get that win validated in Magic and the rest of the match plays out similarly to how it played out, then we're playing in the championship in the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained. And, yeah. That one hurts. I mean, not going to lie. It hurts. You pride yourself on being a great pilot. And, I think I'm the best player in the game. I'll be honest. And, I still do. And even the best players make mistakes. And unfortunately, in the biggest situation when it mattered the most, that's when I made mine. And that's going to happen. But all you can do is move forward and try your best the next time around. So after that devastating loss, we still have one more game to play, a third place game, and there is a lot on the line. We're talking about $300 in crypto coins on the line, as well as a shiny legendary pack, which of course this is a fun little side note. $150 pack. You don't get many opportunities to open those, even though I've already opened 4 this tournament season. It's been a kind tournament season. So we'll be taking on JCon. Again, JCon, anyone who makes us this far in the biggest tournament ever, they have a pretty reasonably wide range. JCon has had quite the day. He was in the final 4 of the Unisticks tournament on the same day, which says a lot about JCon and what he's been doing. Unfortunately for JCon, he lost in the semifinals, but won the third place match. So he got the consolation match in that tournament. My history in consolation matches has been this. I love to complain. Okay, that is basically what I'm known for. I complain about the existence of consolation matches. However, in 4 prior third place matchups, I have won all 4. And in the Cujo challenge, when I lost in my first loss in the double elimination tournament, in the loser's bracket, I won 5 matchups in a row to win the loser's bracket and make it all the way to the championship match, where I, of course, ended up losing part of my reputation to finishing second, but that was so 2021. Second place Muse was 2021. This is first and third place Muse, right? So, unfortunately, we're in a third place match. Are we going to complain about being here? Yes. And am I known for tilting? Yes. But interestingly enough, coming off of a loss in a tournament, in tournaments where I have additional matches after losing a match, I'm actually 9-1, with my only loss being in the championship match itself. And I'm 4-0 in third place matchups. So, despite complaining about the existence of third place matchups, historically, they've been a good thing for me. So going to try to come into this matchup with positive vibes. We're facing JCon here. And here I'm thinking I either want to play Deception because I think it's good into a wide range. Or I want to play Aggro War, with Relic War, which is also good into a wide range. I end up picking with Relic War. Of course, if I knew my opponent was going to play Light, then I would have played Anti-Light. Deception, of course. His range was wide enough that I didn't know that he would play this. So this isn't the best matchup, but look, we've got Unrestrained Power in our opening hand. We've got Whetstone. All we need is a Relic, and we can just go bananas. Right? We can go absolutely bananas. Double Unrestrained Power. You ever keep 2? I think keeping 2 is a little bit too much. We see the Scythe of the Harvest, and we're like, okay, we can play the Scythe of the Harvest, we can play Whetstone, we can play Unrestrained Power. We're going second for the now 6th straight consecutive game after going second in all the games against Sambam. So that is pretty big. Interesting mulligan there, the Scythe of the Harvest. I think that is a mistake, but we get I Need a Weapon, which is actually better. So, yeah, prove me wrong. Of course, what we hate to see, well, we hate to see the Bronze Serpent and we hate to see the Vesper of Concession. First off, I think JCon made a huge mistake just flat out playing the Vesper of Concession. I do have Blitz minions. I do have ways to potentially remove the minion, just not in my hand. So, yeah, they're going to buff that Vesper up, which is very problematic. Here, Savage Strike is the best card. If we had Savage Strike, we could kill Vesper of Concession. We have Carnage Sweep instead. Unfortunately, we can't play Blade of Sticks right now. We can't really do anything because we can't get the Carnage Sweep off in time. We can play Blade of Sticks and run into the Vesper of Concession, effectively trade the Blade of Sticks for the Vesper of Concession. That might have been the best line, but man, we're giving up our I Need a Weapon Relic for Vesper of Concession, which is that is tough. They got the Highborn, and Right now, I feel like a person who got hard countered. I feel like that J-Con reached into my soul, read my mind perfectly, and cued the perfect deck. I have no good lines here. I just pip out a relic. He's going to buy the Bronze Servant and the Sanctum, go face, and kill my relic. Assume so. I mean, otherwise we can play Garnered Sweep. But there is no reason for him not to buy the Bronze Servant and go ahead and just play it. As is indeed what he does, is the correct line. And yeah, here we have Magic Missile Launchers, and Missile Launchers is the perfect card to toss a sweep at with. So we're going to go ahead and set up the Carnage Sweep. It's kind of obvious what we are going to set up here. Trying to get a situation where we remove all their relic removal and then set up our Whetstone plus Unrestrained Power plus Big Burst turn. That is the dream. He's coming at us. He didn't have Prayer of the Desperate. If he had Prayer of the Desperate, he could have gotten us to 1, which probably would have been the line. Especially with the potential Sanctum line with the form of power. But we go ahead, and now, obviously, we have to Carnage Sweep. Our hand is forced here. There's no other line to play on this turn. There's nothing to think of here. We can go ahead and weaken the Highborn Knight some. And now, of course, he's going to be very tempted to just expand wide here. That would be what we're expecting. We actually have 3-turn lethal if we could actually set everything up. The issue is, of course, setting everything up. So here J-Con is taking a bit of a think. They go ahead and play Hester and Pyramid Warden, which basically means I need another Carnage Sweep. But we do not get that. We get Orcish Elite. Now, what I recognize here is I see the opportunity to make a Sanctum purchase. And I make a misplay on this turn. I play the Orcish Elite. And what I should have done is I should have played Blade of Sticks, killed the same minion. And that way I could have conserved my pip. It sets up potential burst turns, keeping the pip alive. But minor detail. This is still just a situation where we've been in an uphill battle, but as you can see in our hand, is we've got bursts if we can figure out a way to live. Also, by playing the Blade of Sticks, I give myself an out of potentially drawing into Carnage Sweep and just not being flat out dead. But the one good thing about the line that I played in the game, if you want to play devil's advocate to my critiques, is I do have Orcish Elite in my Void now, so I do get something back when I kill Pyramid Warden, which is very nice to have as well. So the thing that J-Con has to be salivating over in the Sanctum right now is that card chart. That would be what I would be wanting. Now he's debating on how wide to go. And the answer is go very wide. I have no relics in play. This deck doesn't run Leviathan Hunter. Of course, maybe he doesn't know that, but we don't run Leviathan Hunter. And he goes ahead, plays Radiant Dawn, and yeah, this is awkward. It's awkward because I don't really have any outs. We draw Mobilized, which doesn't really get us anywhere. We can play the Relic. We can Whetstone to kill the Pyramid Warden, which gets us back Orcish Elite, which allows us to kill the 4/5. However, we take 3 in the process, and he has 2 minions on board. And we don't really have a burst way of achieving lethal anytime soon. So we go ahead with the only line that prevents guaranteed lethal, which is double attacking into the 4/5. Of course, I fully expect him to have lethal next turn. This doesn't feel like a situation that we get out of this alive, ever. We go ahead and remove the minion. Now we're thinking, and I'm actually thinking about playing Mobilized here, but we just use a GP. The reason to play Mobilized is I could costs reduce both unrestrained powers. Hypothetically, if we can play both unrestrained powers in the same turn, we can win. Of course, all of that is a moot point because we go ahead and lose game number 1. So in all 4 rounds that I played a match in this tournament, we lost game number 1. That's not a good way to get started. Of course, we made it all the way to the final 4 as that part of our formula. So we keep fighting for it here. This is when you're happy that it's best of 5, because 1 loss, you're more likely to bounce back from a tough situation. So here, I have to think, well, what should I play? And similar to Sam Bam, I thought that his light list, well, actually not similar to Sam Bam at all, but I thought that his light list was his fastest list. And a lot of his other decks were a bit slower. So using the same flawed logic I had last game and playing a deck that I played absolutely horrendously last round, we're on the redemption tour and we're going to try to make Dralamar Magic work. So here we are. Einstein's definition of insanity. And our opponent here, they picked Thievery. Now they're playing Deception. I'm expecting Cutthroats. This was the critical Game 5 situation that we lost. And we see we have 2 helpful Ether Foxes in our Crystal deck this game. So we've got all this game, which is handy because we need to reduce those 3 cost cards, another Cram, and a Sip. Now what I should do here is I should get rid of the Cram and play Sip next turn, and I make the correct decision. So hey, look, we made 1 correct decision playing Dralamar this tournament. We've accomplished 1 thing. They're going to play Pickpocket. We're not too concerned about Pickpocket because any of the cards they can steal from our hand at the moment isn't particularly useful for their cause. I mean, the ramp does help them ramp, I guess, but we are feeling very good about this start. We have the opportunity to play Crystal Tech here. I like to foresee 2. I'm basically digging for Dralamar. Honestly, I could be critical of this line, but I should be fine with it. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure I'm not drawing into Dralamar. Again, that's a reasonable decision on my part. I wanted to be critical of myself, but I'm going to be nice to me. I'm going to be nice. I'm playing around, accidentally drawing Dralamar and moving the game to Cutthroat. We see we have 2 helpful Ether Foxes, so we're going to cost reduce 2 cards from hand. So 1 Cutthroat doesn't prevent us from what we're going to do. They, of course, stole an Ether Fox from my hand and get 2 cost reduction something as well. So now we draw Reject Dogma here, and we're going to go ahead and foresee 2. Those are not the cards we want here. I make a questionable decision and risk it for the biscuit and put both at the bottom. I think what I'm thinking here, and I actually kind of agree with it looking back on the situation, is I'm under a little bit of pressure. So I'm just hoping I don't draw into Dralamar this turn, which again is being a little bit risky, but sometimes you have to play a little bit risky when things aren't exactly going perfect. So our opponent plays the Rune of Sight, which is a card that they're really trying to set up into getting a Cutthroat Insight. That's what they would like to achieve. So we draw Reject Dogma, and we see Dralamar on top of our deck, and we love to see it. The reason being is I can play helpful Ether Fox to reduce the recovered knowledge down to 0, and I can play the Crystal Tech to ramp myself if I would like. Save the pip, but actually it's not necessary because we're actually threatening lethal next turn. So we have everything set up perfectly this game. We're immune to Cutthroat. The top card of our deck is Dralamar. We can go off next turn. Our opponent happens to not have Cutthroat. Convenient. Otherwise, they obviously play it there. And this is a situation where we pretty much need to go off, right? And I think one thing I want to give myself a tad bit of credit for last turn, I didn't play Crystal Tech because I was thinking about potentially playing the Reject Dogmas with Empower at some point, of which case my line would have made a lot of sense. So we go ahead and going to recover some knowledge here, getting the Cram. We're drawing tons of cards. All of this card draw is very good for me. It means I'm very unlikely to fizzle out. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. We draw into Shaped Blast, which is actually not very bad at all. So what I'm trying to do here is find the Ether Bugs, but we aren't really making too much progress on that front here. And now I'm just like, well, I don't want to overdraw, so I'm going to continue to recover knowledge. And we draw Cram. Now we get rid of the Sip of Elixir, get rid of the other Sip of Elixir, and Cram once more. Digging for something, some Ether Bugs here. And all we're going to do is keep digging. Keep digging. Now, Librarian's Prayer, we're very likely to get there. We see both Ether Bugs. We see another Librarian's Prayer. We see the Dimension Doors. So now we know that we can get through everything. We can get through everything right now. We go ahead and reject Dogma. And now it's time to drop some Ether Snap. So Ether Snap. And we can utilize the Ancient Text to kill an Armor Lurker here. I'm actually going to toss the Crystal Tech. We can actually play that because we have gotten so much mana this game. Get the Ether Snap on the board. And right here, this is just 101 how to play Dralamar Magic. So don't even need to do anything with that. Everything is set up perfectly. And we just have lethal right here. It's pretty simple. I should play the Ancient Text to kill the Armored Minion. I should have done that a little bit earlier. Minor details. Minor details. So go ahead, remove the Armored Minion. But as you can see, we have double Magic Inks, so we can go infinite on Magic Inks. We just got to make sure we clear out all of our other lower cost spells in hand. And actually the correct thing to do here is just to, deal some extra damage. And then we can set up the double Magic Inks, which will indeed be lethal. So Magic Inks, Magic Inks, Magic Inks, Magic Inks. This is an infinite combo and will end the game. So we lose game 1, but we get the win in game number 2. We even the score. I got a little bit of redemption for the Dralamar. Our opponent concedes because they know the Infinite Magic Inks combo. They are very well versed in the deck. Been around the block plenty of times. So we get a little bit of redemption for the Dralamar game there. I'll give myself a good grade. Despite the fact that I misplayed against Sambam really badly, we get an ounce of redemption from piloting that game at a reasonable level. Okay, we set up everything. We actually were immune to Cutthroat as everything played out. So now we end up in a very fun situation. It's now game number 3. So it's 1-1. I'm thinking of what should I queue? The deck I am most confident in is I've got a lot of options here. I want to play Hidden Rush. But I get talked into Control Light. Admittedly. I get talked into it. I get talked into Control Light, so here we go. Playing Control Light. I want to play Hidden Rush. So I thought that I could be facing some Relic War. So I teched my Control Light to be stronger against Relic War. So more front lines, more Relic removal. That is our tech. I thought that this was definitely in my opponent's range. I also thought that Control Light played against a lot of his other potential decks. So here we are in a situation where we're playing Control Light. It's super boring. And our opponent is playing what we assume to be Relic War. It could be Control War, but we assume it to be Relic War. We see the Bronze Servant in the Sanctum. We see the Iron-Tooth Goblin in our hand. We're happy to see both. They pick Valka's Presence, which, honestly, I think if they're playing Relic War is incorrect. But it is the decision they elected to go with, and they're going to get some value here with those early minions. They go ahead, they're going to try to swarm the board. They've got the Leviathan Hunter. So this is more of a sign, most likely, of a control war type of player. I have the option to pip out the Guild Enforcer, but I don't feel the need to do that. I could have also played Iron Tooth to remove his relic. I also didn't feel like that was the relic to remove. Not the relic I'm most concerned about in this game. They play a Guild Enforcer. Of course, I have a Guild Enforcer, so fully expect to play my Guild Enforcer. We top deck Ukos and Eclipse. And that's a very interesting top deck, because we could play it and really weaken his board. Instead, we go ahead and play Guild Enforcer for ourselves. Now, one interesting thing to note is our opponent can afford Bronze Servant. However, they just played Mobilized, and they don't want to overdraw, so they're going to leave the Sanctum how it is. And we top deck Light's Levy, which is probably the best card we could have top decked, because we can play Ukos and Eclipse, which reduces their Guild Enforcer to 2/4 and kills all their other minions, and allows us to Light's Levy their Guild Enforcer. While our Guild Enforcer remains a 2/4 on the board, it's still a super, super annoying minion that our opponent doesn't want to deal with particularly. So we go ahead, we deal with that situation very great. And we now have 12 favor, which really poses the question to our opponent. Do you go ahead and grab the Bronze Servant or not? Well, if he grabs the Bronze Servant, he's going to overdraw. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation for our opponent. Do you overdraw? Do you grab it? What do you want to do? And they are thinking here, and they elect to not go ahead and do the thing. So what does that do? Well, it gives us the opportunity. We can attack, and we can go ahead and play CERN. We do this to draw a card. So we weaken their Guild Enforcer. Now, by giving order to their Guild Enforcer, this gives us the opportunity to go face with our minion and purchase the Bronze Servant. Now, the question here is, do I want to play, either the Bronze Servant or the Iron Tooth? I count the cards in my hand, make sure I have 8. I do indeed have 8 cards in hand. Now we're in a situation where they can Carnage Sweep, they can play Soul Survivor if they are that type of deck, but they're going to go ahead and play the Wolf Cult Vanguard, which will remove my Guild Enforcer. Of course, we have Bronze Servant in hand right now, so we feel very good about that situation. Go ahead, pick up the Valka's Presence, and we have a handful of cards, so this seems like a very good time to drop down Elkorith. I mean, when else are you going to want to play it? So just go ahead, go face. And now, one thing I'm pretty aware of is we're very likely to run into a situation where he plays a card like Arc Rush or Savage Strike and then plays Carnage Sweep to wipe the board to get rid of Elkorith, since Elkorith is a very big problem for our opponent. The good news for me is I don't really have to worry about short-term big relics because, I've got Bronze Servant and I've got Iron Tooth Goblin in hand. We're at 29, so even though he's sweeping and getting rid of Elkorith, I don't really feel bad about the situation. They go ahead and play the Lambasting Wand, and I feel like that's kind of bait. And do I want to take the bait or do I want to ignore the bait? Well, actually, I want to get Elkorith back from the void. So, kind of an awkward situation. I elect to... Playing the Bronze Servant is more accurate because they know I have the Bronze Servant. I can play the Bronze Servant and the Radiant Embalmer and use all my mana. So that wasn't an accuracy on my part, looking back on it, because taking the 2 points of damage from Lambasting Wand is fine, just getting rid of their relic. They know I have Bronze Servant in hand, so I gave them information by playing the Iron Tooth. Of course, it's not information that they particularly wanted to see, but it is information, so that was definitely a play mistake on my part. They go ahead, play Wolf Cult, and Wolf Cult Vanguard is going to be very annoying. They play Blade of Sticks. And go ahead and go face, which, what else are you really expecting to do, right? So we draw Helmna. Helmna doesn't really do too much here. We're going to go ahead and we can play Elkorith and go ahead and censure their minion. So that way they can't just use their Wolf Cult Vanguard and their Blade of Sticks to remove my 9/9 with Frontline and Ward. Obviously, if they burn another Carnage Sweep here, we're pretty happy. And otherwise, this is a difficult minion to deal with. They've got Form of Power, And they've got mobilized, so they don't have an easy kill for Elklorith immediately, which is encouraging from my perspective. So we have a 9-9 with frontline on the board, and they don't seem to have a plan to deal with the situation. And they can't really go face with any relics when I have a 9-9 with frontline. And I've got options next turn, such as line in the sand, just to prevent them from attacking. So they're going to expand their board a little bit wider and use Out of Its Misery. So their second Out of Its Misery would be their second overly buffed minion. And here I'm thinking, well, you know, I need to play a card from hand to clear out space from my hand. And I don't really feel like the need to really mess around too much here. Just hit him for 9 and pose the question, hey, I still have the same card that I had last turn. What are you going to do? Your minions can't attack. He didn't have an answer last turn. Hopefully he doesn't have an answer this turn. Of course, he mobilized, so Carnage Sweep, Soul Survivor. Yeah, he has Soul Survivor, so he had an answer to the situation. Not a super shocking resolution to the problem, but it is a resolution for my opponent. They go ahead, get the attack in, play another really buff minion that they got from Out of Its Misery. It's an interesting minion to be running in their list. For sure, not what you would normally expect. So we draw Inescapable Duty. And Inescapable Duty doesn't particularly do that much when we already have another one in hand. We go ahead and Lysander's Mercy to go ahead and put those 2 cards at the bottom. We could have delayed the situation by playing Lips Are Sealed, but I figured, why delay when you can just get rid? So our opponent goes ahead. They need a weapon, so they're going to go ahead and fetch a weapon. They fetch the Blade of Sticks. Again, they know about my Bronze Servant in hand, or they should know about it. I bought it ages ago, but I haven't played it in a long time, so maybe they forgot about it. So this is a pretty easy decision now. Go ahead, remove their relic, and play Guild Enforcer. So we have a front line protecting us, and they have no relic. We're just slowly but surely suffocating our opponent like an anaconda. That's what Control Light likes to do here. So now J-Con has some situations. They need to figure out how they want to proceed here. And the Guild Enforcer is super awkward for my opponent. So they're going to go ahead and attack, which gets it down to 4 health. So they need to do even more damage, and they give up Tavern Brawler, which chips away even more damage, and then the Devouring Blade. So they gave up tons of resources to just get rid of a very small amount. And we can also play Inescapable Duty and get back Relic Hate from the Sanctum if we would like. They go a little bit wide here, which is certainly a line, but we top deck Demogorgon. So it's just hard to resist playing Demo here. It just is. Like, how can you resist playing Demo? But I decide that I'm worried about OTK type of stuff, so I go ahead and play Lysander. I think the Ranger First Bow is a solid Sanctum purchase to go ahead and weaken their board just a tad. Healer of God. That way we don't have to worry about them playing a relic from hand, plus Unrestrained Power, plus Whetstone. I don't know. Maybe they've got like double Whetstone, double Unrestrained Power with the Mobilize, and some miracle with the 1 attack relic that we have to worry about. So keeping a front line on the board has its merits. And speaking of Whetstone, they've got 1. Go ahead and use that to get rid of Cadmus. We're actually happy with that. We're happy to trade Cadmus for a Whetstone. And they go ahead, go face with a couple more minions here. And utilizing the same logic that I used last turn, worried about potential OTKs with relics and miracle Whetstone situations and wanting to have a front line in front of me at all times, I go ahead and play Helmnut. Also playing Helmnut threatens lethal for next turn. So they need an answer for the situation. They need a weapon, but they really don't need a weapon. They need something better than a weapon. So they play I need a weapon, and they need to do something very productive. It's what they need to do. And what are they going to do here? there's really only one card that saves them, and it's Soul Survivor. We have seen one this game, but they got Devouring Blade, and they have a Whetstone. So what they can do here is they can Devouring Blade, Whetstone, and their 2 minions can attack my 2/2, which is something. It keeps them alive a tad bit longer. But here, what I think about now in this situation is I can play Inescapable Duty, and I can get 2 cards back from the Sanctum. And one of them, of course, is going to be Radiant Embalmer, and the other one's going to be a Frontline. And the interesting reason behind taking a Frontline here is if I take a Bronze Servant or like any type of relic removal, my minion just dies immediately. So I'm actually interesting. I take, okay, I get what I did here, because I have a second Inescapable Duty in hand. I don't have to play it. So that line's probably correct. So I secure getting back to Iron Tooth, and I play a Frontline. So he's probably not going to be able to generate an OTK right now. He can play another relic to kill my Cadmos, and that is probably the correct line here. You could have argued that I should have played Iron Tooth because he can just play a relic to kill Cadmos, but this is a difficult situation for my opponent to be in. They need to kill my minion, otherwise I am threatening lethal. And if their solution is to unrestrained power plus unrestrained power, so they've got 32 points of damage, but they have no way around my front line, and we go ahead and get the win. So now the fun begins. We're up 2-1. We're in infinite mana chat. And Saints is like, you know what you need to do next right now? And I'm like, yep, I know what we need to do next. And we both say deception at the same time, so we're in sync. We're in sync. It's deception time, right? And he's like, all right, Mega Greed Deception, 9-hour game. We're going to take this in game 4 and secure 3rd place. And I'm like, Hidden Rush. I want the Hidden Rush. And he's like, don't play Hidden Rush. If you queue into Magic, you're going to lose to Hidden Rush. You're going to get destroyed by Hidden Rush. And there's going to be a game 5. And I'm going to say, I told you so. And don't play Hidden Rush. Whatever you do, don't play Hidden Rush. My response, I want to play Hidden Rush. And he's, don't play Hidden Rush. The math doesn't line up here. Look at the chart. The chart says your opponent's going to play Magic. And then they're going to go boom, 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 boom. They're going to play all the AoEs. Your cats are all going to die. And you're not going to have any fun. And you're going to lose. And then I said, I want to play Hidden Rush. And he's like, don't do it. And then I said, I'm going to do it. And he says, don't do it. And I said, I'm going to do it. And then I went silent. And then he's like, oh, he did the thing. He did the thing. He's gone rogue on us. So, I decided in this game that I want to play Hidden Rush, despite all the advice that's been given to me. And I've gone a little bit rogue here. I've been warned that my opponent could queue Magic, and then I would get destroyed. That's we've been warned. We've been warned in this situation. Okay. But, we decide that the time is now to queue Hidden Rush. Yeah. I like to give cats knives. This has been one thing we've talked about. I'm in a 3rd place match. I want to play Hidden Rush. Being told I can't play Hidden Rush, but it's time to play some Hidden Rush Deception. Our opponent plays the 4C God Power, which makes me think that he is playing none other than Dralamar. But maybe he's playing Control with that God Power. Who knows? But what I see is an opportunity for some value out of Frumentari. We've got a turn 1 play. That turn 1 play is going to be warded. We got a turn 2 play. And then we got a turn 3 potential Frumentari, which draws 2 cards. And we go ahead and get more and more value. So Armor Lurker. And we're setting up the Frumentari for next turn to draw 2 cards. So we feel relatively good about that situation. They go ahead, utilize their Pip, Bibliomaniac. Well, now I'm thinking, well, I don't want to play the Frumentari and just get rid of my minion and I can play 3/1 drops, potentially setting up a bigger Frumentari. So I go ahead and like, all right, we're going to go ahead and go face here. Now, he could have Unannounced Arrival. The interesting thing about Unannounced Arrival is it only kills the Shadow Cat, so it doesn't really hurt me too bad. And I'm threatening to play Frumentari and drawing 3 next turn, which is very effective. 2 minions with Ward are very annoying. They can't just ping off Ward. They're playing 4C, which feels a little bit slow at the moment. So the fact that they played Bibliomaniac tells me that they're probably a control magic list, which means they could easily be sitting on a Shaped Blast right now. They play Lightning Talisman, and Lightning Talisman, oh, that is so crushing. Unfortunately, my Shadow Cat works against me, attacking my opponent, and I lose a lot of value here. That is a potential swing moment. I draw Makeshift Shiv, which is one of the worst cards I could possibly draw. I have to play Frumentari right now, otherwise I'm not going to get any value whatsoever. So I'm debating. I play Frumentari. And we draw 2 cards, we go face, and here I have to make the Sanctum purchase to weaken the relic here. I mean, I have the option of going face and pushing the 3 extra damage, but I would much prefer to keep my board here. So I decide to keep my board, and alright, it looked like we were jamming. It looked like everything was going our way, and he has the perfect. He goes perfect. And that's why you take Clear Mind, I guess, is he set up everything perfectly. Lightning Talisman was the best possible T3 he could have had, and, you know, Shaped Blast was the card he needed to stay in this game. But the one thing Hidden Rush does is it comes at you in waves. So we're just going to regroup. We're like, all right, you played Lightning Talisman, you played Shaped Blast, what do you have for us next? Unfortunately for us, is we probably can't survive another punch to the face. But he needs one more punch to the face. So he's going to go ahead, safeguard himself, draw some cards here. He's looking for that one more AoE to get him out of the situation. Unfortunately for our opponent, front lines don't really buy him that much because we just ignore them. We're Deception, we cheat. Shadow of Letheanon procs the ward, and we're now in a situation where I'm eyeing that Rune of Strength in the Sanctum, kind of salivating a little bit, not going to lie. And I'm trying to calculate if there's a way that I can play that and Assassin's Aim this turn and get the attack in. And the answer is no. There isn't. So I answered the question for you. Now we're debating on what do we want to do. Going Arms Dealer is an all-in method. So we want to have a 3rd wave for the next AoE. And the way I play around this is I do go face with those minions, and I'm like, well, what's the one card that wrecks me here? And it's probably Shaped Blast. So I should have put the Relic on the Rune of Strength on the cat. Though this line is better against Unannounced Arrival plus Spell Boost lines. So this line has merit. There's nothing wrong with putting the Rune of Strength on the Whisper Baron and going all in with that. And we have Arms Dealer, which double Arms Dealer, if they don't have an AoE, represents 8 points of damage. And of course, we've got the Makeshift Shiv with some extra chips. So we actually even have a 3rd wave behind us. Most people think that you board wipe Hidden Rush once, you automatically win the game. We got board wiped, but we come at them at waves, and we go ahead and secure the win and 3rd place. Hello everybody, and you made it through the end of a FakeMews video. These are long, these are epic, so you deserve a pat on the back. And if you've made it this far, the way you give yourself a pat on the back is by hitting that subscribe button. If you smash the subscribe button, you'll get notifications, and my videos will just like pop up on your YouTube screen, and then you'll be like, whoa, FakeMews had another video, and then you can watch it and help my metrics, and that would help me out a lot. Please, 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 it's free. Unlike on Twitch, it costs money to subscribe on Twitch. So the tournament ended up ending with Sam Bam winning it, so keeping the prize within infinite mana, so that is good. It's very handy that if I had to throw it to anybody, it would have been Sam. And I felt like I misplayed the semifinal round, game number 2, particularly really bad, and that cost me my chance at this. But hey, if I could throw it to anybody, it was Sam Bam. He started this tournament with $300 and something in tournament earnings, and after earning over $3,100 in tournament earnings this tournament, he's now number 1 all time. For the all-time tournament earnings, I'll go ahead and flash it up right now. I am now number 2. I was number 2 entering this, though before this tournament, I was behind FastX, and now I'm behind Sam Bam. So always behind somebody on Infinite Mana. Shout out to everybody on the list. Everybody on the list is very difficult to beat, but just want to go ahead and show that. Again, congrats to Sam Bam. It's the biggest tournament in the history of Gods Unchained, and he's been looking to break through in a tournament, and this is kind of his breakout event for sure. Thanks to Saints, even though I was kind of mean to him in my little video thing, I do appreciate your opinions and your help, okay? Okay, but I also like roasting you. It's one of my hobbies. I like roasting people. Thanks to FastX, who was also helping out as well. H Pain was also helping out in the latter rounds of the tournament also. So we had the whole Infinite Mana crew, and we had a nice little voice chat, heading into the tournament, heading into the Final Four as well, to kind of get ourselves in the mental prep for this, big event. So again, I want to thank everybody on Infinite Mana who was helping me out, helping me prepare deck list and strategy and all that sort of stuff. And of course, all of them were also helping Sam Bam. And I mean, hey, a first and a third is a pretty good team result. I do believe we are the best team in Gods Unchained. And you can leave angry comments in the comment section if you believe differently. And I like angry comments, so go ahead and do that. I also want to go ahead and thank PlayToEarn.net. They sponsored this tournament. I mean, $10,000 in prizes. You had Demogorgon giveaway on stream. You had tons of other giveaways, a lot of good cards. Like, I know Neferu and Orfeo were also giving away some of the better Trial of the Gods legendaries there. So that was a lot of prizes to give out, and very generous of PlayToEarn.net. And of course, not only the finals, they sponsored 6 other events as well, which also had some of the biggest prize pools in Gods Unchained. Those qualifier events had some of the biggest prize pools in Gods Unchained until the tournament series. In fact, my biggest cash until my Nature starter deck win was winning one of the Play to Earn events. I think it was event number 3 or event number 4. One of those events I ended up taking down, and that's how I qualified for this event. Also want to go ahead and thank the tournament organizers. I know Sully put a lot of hard work into this. Put a lot of work into the stream. I know it's difficult, and had some difficult situations to rule on throughout the tournament. I made my opinions known on those situations throughout it, but I do appreciate the effort. But I am going to let you know when I strongly disagree with what is going on. Of course, I made mistakes throughout my tournament, and they're allowed to make mistakes as well. The important thing is, when we make mistakes, is to learn from the mistakes and try not to do the same stupid stuff over and over again. Even though, if anybody has ever looked at my chess games, you will see that I have repeated some mistakes. But congrats to anybody who made it through a FakeMews video. It is quite the accomplishment. Shout yourself out in the comment section. And yeah, you deserve praise if you sat through this entire thing. And that's all I gotta say. Until next time, I'll see you either on stream or on my YouTube channel. I hope you all have a great day.